Chapter 258. The Cold Wind Howled. Evil Scholar, who had the weakest cultivation and pet beast, was the first to succumb. As for the others, they were still fine. After all, they had rank 4 pet beasts to protect them, so they wouldn't be frozen by the cold. Black Crow, Madam Ghostchild, and Coffin Man attacked at the same time. The Black Falcon soared into the air, a dark aura swirling around him. He let out a shrill cry, trying to intimidate the enemy. However, this tactic was useless against the old dragon. The latter continued to soar in the air, stirring up a blizzard with each flap. This kind of technique was truly marvelous. Unable to fly up, the Black Falcon was completely suppressed by the old dragon. They weren't even on the same level. The swaddle in Madam Ghostchild's arms let out a shrill cry. The next instant, several air blades flew out. The old dragon sneered, taking the attack head-on with his physical body. Although the air blades were strong, their power was greatly reduced beyond a certain distance. Moreover, the old dragon's scales were tough enough that the air blades could only leave a few shallow scratches on his skin from a distance of several hundred feet. Even Coffin Man was at his wits' end against the soaring dragon. Both he and his pet beast, Zombie Cthulhu, were an adept at flying. The old dragon was clearly using his advantage to control the blizzard within the barrier to freeze people to death. Lin Jin obviously had his own methods. He could just contact the nebula barrier, but that wouldn't do anything to the old dragon. Moreover, if he did remove the barrier, the old dragon would most likely escape. If the old dragon escaped, they wouldn't be able to find him anytime soon, and he would be in danger. This was probably the old dragon's plan. Lin Jin communicated with the Museum of Deadly Beasts. The next instant, the curator's door behind Lin Jin could vaguely be seen. With a creak, the door opened a sliver. Then, an invisible aura surged out along with a beam of light. In an instant, the blizzard the old dragon had conjured was shattered. In the blink of an eye, the blizzard had receded and the sun had risen. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. Lin Jin knew that the old dragon was severely injured. His coiled wire needle had destroyed one of the dragon's veins, so the old dragon was at the end of his tether. Lin Jin borrowed the aura that seeped out from the sliver and wrapped it around a coiled wire needle before shooting it out. The needle was tiny and hard to notice. The old dragon froze in the air before letting out a pained cry and spitting out blood. From the looks of it, he was severely injured. But no one noticed what happened just now. All they saw was a crack in the door behind Curator. Under the illumination of the light, the imposing old dragon collapsed. The Curator is indeed amazing. I don't think the Curator intends to take action personally this time. It's just that the old dragon is courting death by injuring the Curator's disciple. That's why the Curator has to show himself. This old dragon is courting death. Black Crow and Evil Scholar exchanged glances. They could read each other's thoughts from the look in their eyes. Ghost Baby and Coffin Carrying Man had the same idea. At this moment, the Curator only needed to release a divine aura to severely injure the old dragon. Naturally, the Curator didn't need to do anything else. Coffin Man had already rushed forward and punched the old dragon. Although the old dragon was heavily injured, he still had the strength to fight back. However, against an expert like the Coffin-Carrying Man, he could only take a beating and was on the verge of death. Coffin Man was shrouded in a black aura, and his bones were as tough as steel. He was very respectful to the Curator and knew when to stop. He immediately retreated. The old dragon no longer had the strength to resist, so the Curator would be the one to decide what to do next. Lin Jin took another look at Coffin Man. Coffin Man was very perceptive. When the old dragon fell, Coffin Man understood Lin Jin's intention and immediately went forward to cripple the old dragon. He must have used his zombie Cthulhu's power as well before retreating to let Lin Jin make the decision. What a clever man. Despite Coffin Man's cold, terrifying, and taciturn appearance, he was a thoughtful and intelligent man. Lin Jin nodded approvingly. Only then did Black Crow and the others snap out of their daze, musing about how fast Coffin Man was. They regretted not thinking of this earlier and letting Coffin Man seize the initiative. Judging by the Curator's expression, he was obviously pleased with Coffin Man. They had miscalculated. Now that the outcome was determined, Lin Jin strode toward the old dragon. Currently, the old dragon was curled up on the ground, barely breathing. Its jade scale armor was riddled with scars and blood kept gushing out of its mouth. It was a testament to the destructive power of Lin Jin's silver needle that was infused with energy. Of course, Lin Jin was mistaken about one thing. The old dragon's injuries weren't solely due to a single needle. The main reason was that the old dragon was in the middle of casting a spell and was forcefully interrupted, causing the spell to backfire and injure him to this extent. However, if Lin Jin wasn't aware of this, the others were even more clueless. Naturally, they all gave the credit to the curator for defeating the old dragon. Seeing the masked curator approach, the old dragon tried to lift its head several times but failed. Having lived for more than 400 years, the old dragon was incredibly intelligent, so it knew what awaited it. Cough, cough. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, the old dragon said, "The winner takes all. I admit defeat. Spiritual master, your cultivation is profound, and I admit my inferiority. Spiritual master, you are broad-minded and should know that it's not easy for monsters like us to cultivate. Please, spiritual master, have mercy and spare my life. I'm willing to retract the curse and also tell you a great secret." Was the old dragon afraid and begging for mercy now? It was too late. Putting aside what a true expert would do, Lin Jin no longer trusted the old dragon. Moreover, Lin Jin knew that the old dragon didn't have long to live. Even if he didn't kill it, it wouldn't last much longer. The curse was the key to prolonging its life, so how could it retract it so easily? The old dragon was most likely stalling for time again. As for the so-called great secret, Lin Jin wasn't interested in it either. It might just be a lie made up by the old dragon. Hence, Lin Jin remained silent. Sensing that the situation wasn't looking good, the old dragon quickly said, "Spiritual master, are you really going to kill me? If you kill me, the curse on the sixth princess will never be broken. She won't be able to escape death." Lin Jin shook his head. Even in a time like this, the old dragon was still spouting nonsense. Had it been someone else, they might have been skeptical, but Lin Jin refused to believe him at all, because Lin Jin had already obtained the answer to breaking the curse from a museum. All he had to do was kill the old dragon. There was no need for him to do anything else. Seeing that the curator hadn't said a word, the old dragon panicked. Living for more than 400 years was a long time, but the longer it was, the more afraid he was of death. Perhaps knowing that his death was near, the old dragon was trembling all over. At that moment, Lin Jin secretly invoked a spell under his sleeve. The next instant, Xiaohua pounced over, enlarged himself, and bit down on the old dragon's neck. His razor-sharp teeth pierced through the old dragon's neck, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The old dragon twisted and struggled, but gradually lost his strength. "Drink as much as you can. This is dragon blood, a great tonic. It's 100 times better than the dragon blood pill," Lin Jin told Xiaohua. Chapter 259. Lin Jin obviously wouldn't let go of such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Xiaohua was just an average beast to begin with, not even a rare beast. Lin Jin had used pills and acupuncture to help Xiaohua refine the yang flames in his body. After 2 perfect evolutions, Xiaohua's body was cleansed and transformed. Even so, Xiaohua was now at rank 4, his limit. If he wanted to break through again, he would have to undergo a metamorphosis. It was for this reason that Lin Jin had prepared a dragon blood pill for Xiaohua. However, he hadn't had the time to regulate his veins and change his blood. Now was an opportunity. While Xiaohua was sucking the old dragon's blood, Lin Jin stepped forward and took out the lesser dragon blood pill. Using a small knife, he cut open Xiaohua's back and stuffed the pill into his flesh. Then, he sewed it up with a coiled wire needle. After that, he pricked Xiaohua's acupoints with hundreds of silver needles to strengthen his veins and change his blood. Everyone around them was surprised to see this. Be it the Black Crow scholar or the coffin bearer, they had never seen such a technique before. Who would dare to prick an acupoint to release all the blood in their body? No matter how powerful a beast was, once all its blood was drained, it would surely die. But Xiaohua was bleeding all over. As the blood flew out, it immediately turned into flames. With the coiled wire needle stabilizing Xiaohua's internal organs, he wouldn't die even if he lost blood. After that, it was time to cleanse his blood. Half of the old dragon's neck had been bitten off by Xiaohua, and all his blood had been sucked dry. But even so, the old dragon didn't seem to be breathing his last breath. After all, he was an old monster that had lived for more than 400 years. His tenacious vitality was nothing short of amazing. But anyone could tell that the old dragon was only hanging on to his last breath. He wasn't completely dead yet, but it was only a matter of time. This is the blood marrow cleansing technique. Great esteemed master, I, Yu Hong, know my wrongs. Since it's not easy to cultivate, please save my life. The old dragon seemed to have seen something incredible, as his tone was filled with fear and disbelief. However, before he could finish his sentence, he let out a breath of air. The next instant, the old dragon's head tilted to the side, and he died. Almost at the same time, the old dragon died. Emperor He Qian seemed to have sensed something. His pupils dilated, and he quickly used the power of their blood contract to stabilize his rank 4 jade dragon. He Qian vaguely heard an angry roar. He Qian, how dare you betray me? His roar was filled with unwillingness and resentment. Just hearing it made one shiver and break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, the voice soon disappeared without a trace, as if it had never been there. Among the ministers, those with rank 3 jade dragon pet beasts also sensed their pet beasts growing restless and tried their best to calm them down. Some of them whose blood contract realm was too low actually lost control of their pet beasts and lost control of them. For a time, the mansions of many ministers were in a mess, and it was a mess. In some places, lives were lost. A few palace maids were taking care of the 6th princess Hiyu day and night. There were also imperial physicians standing guard outside. During this period of time, they were very careful, afraid that something might happen. But at this moment, the 6th princess, who had been lying quietly on the bed, suddenly had a pained expression on her face. Her body suddenly arched up, and there was a ball of cold air in her lower abdomen. At this moment, it was howling in rage. But moments later, the cold air disappeared without a trace. The palace maids in the room were scared out of their wits. Earlier, a strong gust of wind blew in the room, and black air swirled around. They could vaguely make out the silhouette of a dragon swimming around. The braver ones managed to withstand it, but the more timid ones simply screamed and fainted. Emperor He Qian was the first to report the situation. He Qian rushed over as well. Your Majesty, just now, a palace maid knelt down to report. He Qian waved his hand. That's enough. Don't speak of this outside. Remember, anyone who says anything will be executed. Yes, yes. You're dismissed. At He Qian's order, everyone retreated from the room. He Qian turned to Hiyu. Although she was still unconscious for some reason, her complexion looked much better. This time, He Qian didn't even call for the imperial physician. After a closer look, he clenched his fists in agitation. It's gone. It's really gone. Even now, He Qian couldn't confirm his guess. He immediately called for head eunuch Yao Sheng and had him send someone to gather information. Soon, he received a report. Jade Dragon Temple is still surrounded by a barrier. No one is entering or exiting, Yao Sheng reported honestly. He Qian nodded. Then, remembering something, he ordered, Go, have someone release Qing. 7th Princess? Yao Sheng hesitated. Your Majesty, 7th Princess has been causing a ruckus for the past few days. I'm afraid it's fine. Qing'er has a straightforward and innocent personality. When her pet beast evolved unexpectedly, I knew there must be an expert helping her. Besides, she has mentioned the name curator more than once. I think the expert she meant must be the curator as well. Now that the situation has been settled, letting Qing'er out will be beneficial to us. What should I do if that protective curator comes looking for her? Yao Sheng hurried off to carry out He Qian's orders. Along the way, Yao Sheng was deep in thought. From start to end, Everything was within His Majesty's expectations. One could say that His Majesty was the true winner this time. As expected of a king, all Yao Sheng needed to do now was follow his orders. He wouldn't ask questions that shouldn't be asked. After regaining her freedom, He Qing hurried over to He Yu's side. Even when she saw He Qian, she bowed with a straight face before running to her sister's bedside to check on her. "Qing'er, don't worry. Your sister is fine now." He Qian was all smiles. As the emperor, He Qian rarely smiled. At least, He Qing couldn't remember her father ever smiling before. She had always had a stern and dignified expression on her face, but at this moment, her father, the emperor, was actually smiling. Moreover, he was smiling very happily, as if something great had happened. He Qing couldn't figure out the specifics. She was also a little afraid of her father, so she didn't dare to ask. But she believed that He was fine, because the curator had promised her that with his abilities, he could definitely do it. He Qing had never doubted him since the beginning. Inside the temple, Lin Jin still hadn't deactivated the nebula barrier. Lin Jin didn't have any plans to cleanse Xiao Hua's bone marrow, but since he was here, he might as well do it. The others didn't have any objections. Being able to witness such a great skill like bone marrow cleansing with their own eyes was more than what they could ask for. They held their breaths as they watched excitedly. I've heard of bone marrow cleansing before. Legend has it that, during the golden age of immortals, this was done for cultivators. Now that beasts are in power, changing a beast's constitution is an incredible skill. I didn't expect the curator to know how to do it too. Amazing. Evil Scholar had read quite a lot. Although he wasn't the most skilled, he was still quite knowledgeable. Now that he said it, everyone understood. "Should keep it down. Don't disturb the curator," Black Crow suddenly said. At this time, there were no longer any flames on Xiao Hua's body. The red fur on his body had also changed a little. Some of it glowed with a blue light. Ghost Child looked hesitant. After some thought, she said, "This Jade Dragon and the Fire Wolf's attributes aren't compatible. Logically speaking, even if blood is to be exchanged, the 5 elements must be compatible. Otherwise," she didn't finish her sentence, but everyone understood what she meant. The Jade Dragon's attributes were wind and water. Wind and water could form ice. Needless to say, the Fire Wolf was a fire elemental. Even if it had other attributes, it would at most be wood or metal. Since water and fire were incompatible, they couldn't be fused. A single misstep could cause the pet beast to die. Chapter 260. The conflicting attributes of ice and fire were no joke. No matter what the situation was, ice and fire would not exist at the same time. It was fine if they were separated by a distance, but it was impossible for these two attributes to be used together. Everyone here was a villainous expert with considerable knowledge. Yet, they had never seen anyone forcefully fusing 2 different attributes into a single pet beast. In fact, there were pet beasts with conflicting attributes, but they were innate. Innate constitutions were bestowed upon them by the heavenly axiom, so it was possible. However, these types of pet beasts were basically useless. No one would form a blood pact with them, nor would anyone spend time and effort to nurture them. In fact, creatures with conflicting attributes, be it humans or beasts, were plagued with disasters and had a short lifespan. If someone had told them that they could rely on human strength to fuse 2 conflicting attributes into a pet beast, none of them would have believed it. Even if someone did, they would think it was a fantasy story. But now, they were witnessing it with their own eyes. If this can be done, wouldn't the curator's abilities be on par with the heavenly axiom? Black Crow mumbled to himself. Although his words were exaggerated, it was clear what he was thinking at the moment. Meanwhile, Lin Jin already knew the old dragon's attribute. During their last encounter, he had gotten a thorough understanding of the old dragon through the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Lin Jin knew that the old dragon's attribute was completely incompatible with Xiao Hua's. They were practically conflicting. Logically speaking, even if he wanted to change blood and cleanse his marrow, he should have chosen a compatible attribute, or at least one that didn't clash. But even so, Lin Jin still messed it up. This was because there was a solution in the museum that could solve the problem they were currently facing. In other words, he had a ready-made manual, so he could just follow it. There was no need to think too much about it, because up until now, nothing in the museum had ever gone wrong. Moreover, Lin Jin's current level had reached new heights. He wasn't just relying on the museum of deadly beasts. When he used it, he could also improve his knowledge. He thought that method was reasonable, so he used it without hesitation. As for how to fuse ice and fire, this was essentially impossible. However, everything in the world could be split into two, and yin and yang could be combined. The method in the Museum of Deadly Beasts was to use the coiled wire needle and dragon blood to refine Xiao Hua's internal organs, divide yin and yang, and fuse them into the Tai Chi diagram. This way, yin and yang could be combined. It was very simple to explain, but those who didn't understand and didn't know how to do it would definitely think that it was a fairy tale. In order to achieve this, the pulse-seeking technique was indispensable, and he also needed a pure fire-type dragon blood pill. Coincidentally, Lin Jin had both. The lesser dragon blood pill he received as a reward in the cultivator tournament happened to be of the fire attribute. With this, it would be possible for him to give Xiao Hua a yin-yang fusion. Xiao Hua, this is a great opportunity for you. When the ice and fire fuse into a yin-yang Tai Chi, it'll definitely be painful. Just bear with it. Lin Jin whispered as he walked over and stroked Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua whimpered a few times. All right. Lin Jin activated his acupuncture technique, and hundreds of silver needles pierced into Xiao Hua's body at the same time. They pierced his acupoints, channeled his spirit, and divided his yin and yang. The entire process took less than an hour, but Xiao Hua was already in excruciating pain. However, it gritted its sharp teeth and endured it without making a sound. Yin and yang fusion, Lin Jin said. He lifted a finger and pointed. The next instant, Xiao Hua's body exploded into pieces. This startled Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others so much that they took a step back in fright. It failed. It's over, it's over. Sure enough, these conflicting attributes are difficult to fuse. Even the curator can fail. Each of them had their own thoughts, but they were all worried. However, they soon discovered to their horror that the body of the fire wolf beast had been split into two. One was burning like a raging flame, while the other was floating like ice. At this moment, the coffin man seemed to have thought of something, and his whole body trembled. Ghost Child, this is a Dharma body. Coffin man's voice was trembling, but it was clear that he was extremely agitated. It was hard to imagine that with Coffin man's personality, he could speak in such a tone. It was obvious how shocked he was. At the mention of Dharma body, Ghost Child shuddered as well. She took a closer look and nodded. The spirit enters the body, the skill is infused into the heart, and the spirit embryo is nurtured. This is the Dharma body. Who would have thought that we, the Southern Mountain deities, would have the chance to witness the Dharma body technique that we, the 5 deities of Nanling, have been trying so hard to obtain all those years ago? At this moment, forget Ghost Child and Coffin Man. Even their pet beasts were excited. Madame Ghost Child's swaddling clothes let out a strange baby cry in excitement. Inside Coffin Man's coffin, the zombie Cthulhu was restless as well, knocking against the coffin. Black Crow and Evil Scholar, on the other hand, did not know the wonders of Dharmakaya and were a little confused. However, they were very close to Ghost Child and Coffin Man and had heard the names of their opponents. They understood that Dharmakaya was no small matter. Curious, they asked in hushed tones while Ghost Child and Coffin Man explained to them. Now that they understood the wonders of the Dharma body, both Black Crow and Evil Scholar wore expressions of yearning. When ancient cultivators embarked on the path of immortality, the Dharma body was a stage they had to go through. Moreover, the Dharma body is a manifestation of the law and can manipulate the power of the 5 elements. Isn't this no different from immortals? Evil Scholar suddenly muttered. Coffin Man was usually quiet, but when it came to his favorite topic, he would talk endlessly. Without waiting for Ghost Child to speak, he explained, first of all, a Dharma body isn't an immortal, but all immortals have Dharma bodies. Also, now that the immortal path has fallen, I'm afraid there are no longer any true immortals left in this world. On the other hand, beast cultivators are on the rise. According to ancient records, beast cultivation used to be a minor path back in the day, but now it has become mainstream. Beasts can also cultivate dharma bodies so naturally, it's more difficult. Back then, we, the 5 deities of Namling, searched for years for a pet beast dharma body, but to no avail. Because of this, when we saw the curator condensing a dharma body for that fire wolf, we were inspired. Perhaps the curator is a true immortal of this era. It was obvious how much Coffin Man worshipped the curator. Forget him, everyone else here was filled with admiration. Even their pet beasts were staring at the fire wolf enviously. To have a true immortal condensing a dharma body, for it was such a great opportunity and luck. Why couldn't such a good thing happen to them? However, just because they couldn't do it now didn't mean they couldn't in the future. If they were lucky, the curator might even help them condense a dharma body in the future. This kind of thing, just thinking about it, made people excited. Meanwhile, Lin Jin had already sheathed his needles. Given the current situation, the pulse-seeking technique was no longer necessary. Chapter 261. According to the museum's description of the fire wolf's blood and marrow cleansing, yin and yang could be refined. After that, there would be different branches. The top branch was to condense a dharma body. The middle branch was to condense a yin and yang dharma body, and the bottom branch was to condense an ice and fire spirit. These 3 options obviously had different levels of difficulty. Lin Jin had already read through them. The best dharma body among these 3 branches was so difficult that it was practically impossible to achieve. Hence, he gave up on it. As for the worst one, he wouldn't choose it unless he had no other choice. And so, only the middle option remained. The yin and yang dharma body. This was the path of mediocrity. As long as there was a balance of yin and yang, one could condense a dharma body. Although it was average, it depended on the time. During the ancient era of immortals, it was only so, but it could still be considered mediocre. But now it was absolutely amazing. In this world, be it humans or monsters, who could still condense a dharma body. Hence, Black Crow and the others had truly learned something new today. It wasn't easy for Lin Jin to help Xiao, who condensed this mediocre yin-yang dharma body. Fortunately, with the rank 5 J-Dragon's blood and Xiao was 2 perfect evolutions, he now had a solid foundation. With Lin Jin's previous blood transfusion and marrow cleansing, it was now possible for him to condense a dharma body. Dharma body fusion, yin-yang rotation. Lin Jin invoked a spell, using his own spirit energy as a guide. The next instant, extreme cold and pure yang merged into one. They first collided before gradually calming down, forming a yin-yang taiji symbol. Then, a cocoon of ice and flame grew on the taiji symbol. The cocoon was made of ice threads, but it could be coated in flames. It was a rare occurrence, and it was only slightly bigger than a fist. Even after the cocoon grew larger, it was only about 2 feet tall. Lin Jin couldn't hold on any longer. He was wearing a demon mask. Otherwise, the others would definitely be able to see that his face was pale and bloodless right now. According to his original intention, he should have made this frigid flame cocoon as tall as a person, or even bigger. Only then would the Dharmakaya that hatched be considered perfect and awesome. It could even directly push Xiao Hua to the 5th level. But the problem was that he was essentially still a mortal, not an ancient cultivator. Thus, even though his heart was willing, his strength was insufficient. This was also because he had risked his life. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to support this much. Just as she was about to faint, Lin Jin retracted his hand just in time, forcing himself not to collapse to the ground. Immediately, he used the pulse-seeking technique to ease the pain, but even then, the effect was minimal. At this time, the frigid flame cocoon broke. A small little flame crawled out. However, there was a soft glow around Xiaohua's body. That was because Xiaohua no longer had a physical body. Right now, he was in his avatar state. In this state, Xiao Hua could freely control ice and fire. Compared to before, he was many times stronger. Although he did not directly advance to the 5th rank, his strength was enough to contend with a true 5th rank. More importantly, Lin Jin had cleansed Xiao Hua's body, which was equivalent to reconstructing his body. Xiao Hua was no longer a fire wolf. Not even rare beasts could compare to him. Given time, his future achievements would be unimaginable. Lin Jin was barely holding on. He didn't expect Xiao Hua's Dharma body to be so draining. He didn't say much as he didn't have the strength to. He reached out to retrieve the nebula flag before communicating with the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Taking a step back, he vanished without a trace. Right now, Lin Jin had no choice but to head to the Museum of Deadly Beasts for a while. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good if he fainted outside. More importantly, he was here as the curator. If he really fainted, wouldn't his invincible image crumble? Hence, even if he were to faint, he had to hide in the visitation hall first. The visitation hall could be open to Lin Jin at any time. This was the convenience of being the curator, which made him different from the other visitors. When Black Crow, Ghost Child, and the others saw the curator vanish and the barrier around them disappearing, they knew that the curator had left without saying goodbye. But none of them dared to complain. Back in the visitation hall, the curator had always been amiable. Now that they saw the curator in action, it was truly terrifying. Against the old dragon, the curator defeated him with his aura alone. Then, he used his supernatural powers to manifest a Dharma body for his disciple's pet beast. It was amazing. Today has really been an eye-opener. Evil Scholar was so excited that his fingers were trembling. Not bad. This trip to Jade Dragon Kingdom wasn't in vain, Black Crow said excitedly. He looked at the firewolf. This firewolf was as small as a kitten, and its aura seemed average. But Black Crow knew better than to judge from its appearance. This firewolf was already at the Dharma body level. Even if he and the Black Falcon were to go all out, they probably wouldn't last more than 10 moves. Everyone, Ghost Child called out. Only then did the others snap out of their daze. The temple was now surrounded by soldiers in full armor, wielding spears and crossbows. All of them were brimming with murderous intent. In front of them were hundreds of armored rhinoceroses. These beasts had incredibly thick hide armor and were huge in stature. They were like moving walls. If they charged together, no one could stop them. These people were obviously from the Jade Dragon Kingdom, and they had surrounded the area. However, Black Crow and Ghost Child weren't ordinary people, so they didn't care. Although there were many soldiers, they weren't worth mentioning in their eyes. As for the beasts, they were the same. A general rode forward, but didn't carry a weapon. Instead, he shouted, "His Majesty, the Emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom, invites Mr. Curator into the palace." They were here to invite the curator. But the curator had already left. Seeing the people around them, Black Crow smirked. These people are lying to themselves. Who are they trying to scare by bringing so many people here? Even if they invited me, Black Crow, and your emperor came personally, I might not even do them the honor. How can you be so stingy when inviting the curator? Who would go? Beside him, Evil Scholar chuckled as he waved his folding fan. Madame Ghost Child patted her swaddle as she stared at the general. However, the general didn't dare to look her in the eye. It couldn't be helped. Madame Ghost Child's gaze was too sinister. No matter how strong one was, they wouldn't dare to look her in the eye for too long. Instead, Coffin Man said, "The curator's disciple is from Jade Dragon Kingdom. It's best if we don't get into a conflict with them." Coffin Man was the calmest person in this crucial moment. I almost forgot. Evil Scholar snapped out of his daze and quickly retracted his murderous aura. Right now, he didn't look as crazy as before. Madame Ghost Child stepped forward and said, "General, please go back and inform Jade Dragon Emperor that the curator has left to attend to some matters. I'm afraid he won't be able to visit." Chapter 262. The leading general was clearly hesitant. Just then, a wolf's howl was heard. The next instant, the weather changed. Strong winds blew and dark clouds gathered. The entire royal capital's temperature seemed to have dropped a little. The sudden change in weather was clearly not natural. In the past, only the Jade Dragon Beast in the Jade Dragon Temple could do something like this. The leading general was also Emperor He Qian's trusted aide. As a trusted aide, he was privy to many things. For example, he knew that today might be the day the fate of Jade Dragon Kingdom would be decided. He also knew that the old dragon in the temple might be dead. But if that was the case, why would the weather change? Could it be that the old dragon wasn't dead yet? At the thought of this, fear welled up in his heart. If the old dragon wasn't dead, then things would be troublesome. The emperor had obviously betrayed the Jade Dragon deity. If the old dragon didn't die in the hands of the curator, the consequences would be unimaginable. In fact, it wasn't just this general. Everyone in the royal capital was panicking at the sudden change in weather. The one who was the most shaken was obviously Emperor He Qian. He was currently sitting in the palace, looking up at the stormy sky with a grave expression. Euler's curse has been broken. Logically speaking, the Jade Dragon deity should be dead. So why would the weather change? He Qian mumbled to himself. He knew that this ability to stir up the weather was the Jade Dragon deity's unique skill. In the past, whenever He Qian angered the other party, the Jade Dragon deity would do the same. He Qian had had enough of this. The entire He family had been under the Jade Dragon deity's control for so many years. He Qian had had enough of it. Hence, he decided to use the curator to destroy the Jade Dragon deity. Of course, doing this was a risk. It was a gamble. If the curator failed, the Jade Dragon deity would surely hold He Qian accountable for his betrayal. He Qian had given this matter careful thought. However, based on the curator's abilities and tricks, He Qian felt that the risk was worth taking. If everything went according to plan, the one who helped He Qian's rank 2 tetra-winged butterfly dragon evolve to rank 3 was the curator. He Qian had investigated this before. Also, he knew about Lin Jin's growth. Lin Jin's sudden rise to power was nothing out of the ordinary. This wasn't normal at any point in time. However, if Lin Jin had an important figure like the curator backing him up, his rise to power was nothing out of the ordinary. Other than that, the incident with Snake Country showed He Qian the curator's terrifying ability to mobilize people. Be it Black Crow or Madame Ghostchild, neither of them could be ordered around by an intermediate country. In fact, even a major country couldn't order these villainous experts around, but the curator could do it. This was fundamentally different from Minister Yu's method of spending some money to hire experts of the evil path. Spending money to hire experts of the evil path to kill a few people was fine, but asking them to fight a war with another intermediate kingdom was something that no evil path expert would listen to. From this point alone, one could tell that the curator was no small fry. Especially the last time, the Jade Dragon deity seemed to have suffered a little at the hands of the curator, which prompted He Qian to make up his mind to take control of the situation in the royal city at a critical moment. On the imperial court side, not only did Minister Yu side with the Jade Dragon deity, but many of the officials also obeyed the Jade Dragon deity's orders. This time, He Qian used Minister Yu's death to gain control of this group of people. He Qian could control these conflicts, but he couldn't do anything about the Jade Dragon deity. There was no doubt that the 6th princess, He Yu, had broken the curse in her body. Moreover, He Qian's pet beast, a rank 4 Jade Dragon, was also visibly agitated. This meant that the Jade Dragon deity had been slain. So what was going on with this sudden change in weather? He Qian finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He immediately called for his men. He wanted to head over to the temple to investigate. Meanwhile, over at the temple, the one stirring up the storm wasn't the Jade Dragon deity, but Xiaohua, who had obtained the yin-yang dharma body. Xiaohua's roar earlier was just a casual action. He didn't expect it to stir up a storm. Even Xiaohua was shocked. Having just obtained the Jade Dragon deity's power, Xiaohua was clearly not used to it yet. Not to mention it, even Heiya and the others were dumbfounded. This yin-yang celestial body was indeed extraordinary. A simple roar could actually stir up the wind and clouds. This was too much. Just then, the general came to his senses and quickly said, "It's a pity that curator isn't here. Everyone, if you have time, feel free to visit the palace." Just as Black Crow was about to decline, Evil Scholar held him back and said, "General, please wait for a moment." Seeing a door open, the general was overjoyed and quickly retreated. Now, he could see clearly that this group of people could not be stopped by force at all, so he immediately changed his strategy. Moreover, when he came, His Majesty the Emperor had also told him not to threaten them, but to be amiable. Even if they wanted to leave, he could not force them to stay. The surrounding soldiers retreated as well, leaving only a few behind to guard the area. Black Crow and the others were confused. Evil Scholar said, "Curator didn't say he wouldn't be back. Maybe something came up at the last minute. It's not good for us to just leave. Why don't we wait here in the royal capital? Curator will return sooner or later." At this, the others agreed that this was the best option. Also, they couldn't leave. After all, the Fire Wolf and White Ape were here, while Curator and Lin Jin weren't. They had to look after them. At this time, Emperor He Qian also hurried over. First, he glanced at the temple. Seeing that there was no longer any dragon energy left, he knew the Jade Dragon deity was dead. This made the stone in his heart fall to the ground. After years of humiliation, the royal He family could finally make a comeback. They would no longer be oppressed by the Jade Dragon deity and would no longer need to use the women of the family to prolong his life. "Your Majesty, just now." The general reported the situation in detail. He Qian was stunned. He heard that it was a fire wolf that had stirred up the wind and clouds earlier. Since when did a fire wolf have such supernatural powers? He Qian stepped forward and the general immediately shouted, "Jade Dragon Kingdom, His Majesty the Emperor has arrived." The Jade Dragon Emperor had arrived. Black Crow and the others looked over. As villainous experts, they didn't care about the so-called royal authority. Since they all had rank 4 pet beasts, they had nothing to fear. However, they still had to be courteous, especially when the other party had taken the initiative to greet them. "I, He Qian, have long heard of your names." He Qian didn't seem any less intimidating, but he was now more approachable. He didn't lose the dignity of a royal family, but he still gave others the impression that he was an equal. Speaking of which, it wasn't easy for him to achieve this. He greeted them with a smile and was courteous. Even villainous experts couldn't keep a straight face at a time like this. Moreover, Black Crow and the others weren't sure what Curator's attitude toward this Jade Dragon Emperor was, so it was better to be polite. More importantly, even if they didn't want to give this emperor face, they had to show He Qing some respect. Chapter 263. Greetings, Your Majesty. Greetings, Emperor Jade Dragon. The few of them bowed in unison. Of course, they weren't citizens of the Jade Dragon Kingdom, so there was no need for formal greetings. He Qian has long heard of the curator's great name and came to meet you today. However, I heard that he had to leave due to some matters, so I'm sorry. However, all of you are equally famous. If you have the time, feel free to visit the palace. I will treat you all as my honored guests, He Qian said with a smile. Black Crow and the others exchanged glances. Knowing them, they didn't want to have too much to do with royalty. Their visit this time had nothing to do with the Jade Dragon Kingdom either. It was entirely due to the curator's summons. Without him, they wouldn't have gotten themselves involved in this mess. Although they planned to stay here for the next few days, they had no intention of visiting the palace. Madame Ghostchild said, "Your Majesty, I have a question. I hope you can answer me honestly." "Go ahead." He Qian glanced at the beautiful woman, musing. So this is Madame Ghostchild, one of the top experts on the villainous path. Rumor has it that no one in South Continent dared to provoke her. Even intermediate countries avoided her as much as possible. If he could recruit an expert of this level for his own use, it would definitely be beneficial to the Jade Dragon Kingdom. Now that the Jade Dragon deity was killed and Minister Yu was dead, they had lost 2 experts. Especially the Jade Dragon deity, who used to be a rank 5 dragon and once pushed the Jade Dragon Kingdom to the ranks of premium countries. Unfortunately, that was just a temporary glory. Later on, the Jade Dragon deity was severely injured by a certain country's guardian beast. As if scared out his wits, he holed up, causing the Jade Dragon Kingdom's strength to decline. Later on, He had to use the lives of royal ladies to prolong his life. Now that the Jade Dragon curse had been broken, although they were free from the evil dragon's control, the Jade Dragon Kingdom's strength was greatly reduced, and they urgently needed experts to replenish their ranks. These people were no ordinary people. If they could serve the Jade Dragon Kingdom, perhaps the Jade Dragon Kingdom could still become a premium country in the future. As he pondered, Madame Ghostchild asked, "Your Majesty, has the curse been removed from 6th Princess Hiyu's body?" This was what Madame Ghostchild wanted to know. She knew that this was the curator's motive. He had done so much just to help He-Ching lift the curse on her sister, Hiyu. Now that the old dragon was dead, it was still unknown whether the curse had been lifted or not. When He-Chien heard this, he was certain that the curator had taken action because of his 6th daughter. "Thank you for your concern. The curse in my 6th daughter's body has been removed. She's fine now," He-Chien said. Madame Ghostchild nodded. It was enough to confirm this matter. There was no need to ask anything else. Naturally, none of them would really go to the palace as guests. After exchanging a few pleasantries, He-Chien did not insist. On the way back to the palace, He-Chien instructed, for the next few days, do not send anyone to disturb them. If they want to stay in Royal City, let them stay. "Your Majesty, these people are villainous experts after all. Almost every one of them has a rank 4 pet beast. If they have ulterior motives, I'm afraid," the subordinate whispered. He-Chien shook his head. "So what if you're on guard?" Without another word, he spurred his horse back to the palace. He-Chien had kept the incident at Jade Dragon Temple under tight control. Only a few people in the royal city knew the truth. Over the next 2 days, the entire Jade Dragon dynasty was shaken. Many officials were sacked and imprisoned. Some were even beheaded, losing their lives. There were also people who were promoted. It was a drastic change. Once the Jade Dragon deity died, his faction was almost wiped out by He-Chien. In terms of methods, He-Chien was undoubtedly very forceful. This was the only way he could stabilize the situation in Jade Dragon Kingdom. However, outside of officialdom, things were peaceful. In the royal city, Black Crow and the others had been waiting for the curator to return for several days. On the 3rd day, Lin Jean finally pushed open the door and entered. The group immediately got up. Most of them had never seen Lin Jean before, but when they saw the fire wolf pouncing at him and White Ape respectfully addressing him as master, they knew this young man was the curator's disciple, Lin Jean. "Appraiser Lin." The group got up and saluted. Even if he was only the curator's disciple, he was still a disciple who represented the curator. Hence, they were polite to him. He had been recuperating for the past few days. After being injured by the old dragon, the curator showed up. "Where's the curator?" Evil Scholar asked. Lin Jean smiled. "The curator has something to attend to, so he sent me here to thank you all. Thank you for your help." Having said that, he saluted. The group quickly waved to return the gesture. Of course. We owe the curator a great debt of gratitude. Forget something as trivial as this. Even if we had to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of flames, we wouldn't even frown, Black Crow vowed. Lin Jean smiled, not suspecting anything. These people were indeed loyal. Although they were all trying to curry favor with the curator and receive his guidance, it was still not easy for them to do so. Right, that old Taoist has been waiting for 2 days too. But he's not staying in an inn. He's staying in an abandoned yard in the city, Evil Scholar said. Lin Jean nodded, acknowledging. The old Taoist was definitely going to meet him, but Lin Jean had no intention of using the curator's identity. Helping Xiao Huo condense the yin-yang Dharma body had taken a toll on Lin Jean. Even after recuperating in the visitation hall for 2 days, he only managed to recover a little. If he used the curator's identity, it would be bad if he was discovered. Moreover, Lin Jean had made up his mind. After all, the curator's identity wasn't real. Hence, he would only appear in the visitation hall from now on. If he could avoid using the curator's identity outside, he would do so. Lin Jean noticed that Evil Scholar and Coffin Man seemed disappointed. He knew that they must have something to ask of the curator. After some thought, Lin Jean saluted them. Before he left, the curator left some words for me. I wonder if you two would like to hear them? Evil Scholar and Coffin Man were indeed disappointed. They came here to meet the curator and also to receive his guidance. Now that the curator had left without saying goodbye, they would be lying if they said they weren't disappointed. Upon hearing Lin Jin's words, their faces lit up. "I want to hear it. I want to hear it," Evil Scholar said anxiously. Coffin Man stepped forward as well. "Appraiser Lin, please tell us what the curator left for us." Lin Jin smiled. "The curator said that he has been observing your pet beasts and told me some ways to improve them. If you too want to hear it, I will tell you the truth." Lin Jin was spouting nonsense. He was the curator, so this so-called improvement method was something he came up with. However, Evil Scholar and Coffin Man believed him without a doubt. They rubbed their palms together in excitement. Beside him, Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild were delighted as well. They weren't in a hurry because as visitors of the visitation hall, they would be able to meet the curator next time. However, Evil Scholar and Coffin Man weren't as lucky. Although the curator wasn't going to personally appraise their beasts this time, Appraiser Lin, as the curator's disciple and having received instructions from the curator himself, shouldn't be too bad. Chapter 264. Little did they know that Lin Jin and curator were actually the same person. Lin Jin turned to Evil Scholar. Lin Jin could still remember Evil Scholar's pet beast clearly. It looked like a white cat, but it was actually a rank 3 spirit devourer with all 5 elements. Moreover, it was showing signs of evolution. Speaking of which, this pet beast was rather unique. Before it reached rank 4, it was nothing special. Even when compared to other rank 3 pet beasts, it had no advantage. But once it evolved into rank 4, everything changed. Once its spirit devourer bloodline was activated, most pet beasts of the same rank wouldn't stand a chance against it. Evil Scholar had no idea how he got his hands on this spirit devourer beast. It seemed like he didn't know how powerful this spirit devourer beast was. Otherwise, he would have used special methods to raise it, and it wouldn't have failed to evolve by now. But to Lin Jin, none of this mattered. With Lin Jin's current abilities and skills, he probably didn't need any external help to evolve a rank 3 pet beast that was showing signs of evolution. The pulse-seeking technique alone could help it evolve. "Scholar, let me take a look at your pet beast." Lin Jin extended his hand. Seeing this, Scholar quickly reminded him, afraid that his white cat would scratch Lin Jin. But just as he was about to speak, Black Crow chuckled. "Scholar, relax. Don't forget that Appraiser Lin is curator's disciple." At first, the scholar didn't understand what Lin Jin meant. But when he saw how easily Lin Jin held his white cat in his arms, the scholar immediately understood what he meant. Black Crow seemed to have told him that curator could subdue beasts. Back when they first went to the visitation hall, Black Crow had ordered his black falcon to attack, but the creature had knelt down halfway. When he told Lin Jin this, Black Crow had a complicated expression on his face. At first, the scholar thought Black Crow was exaggerating. But after witnessing the curator, witnessing how easily Lin Jin carried the white cat in his arms, the scholar believed him. Sure enough, a great teacher produces a great disciple. Evil Scholar mumbled. Everything else aside, just this ability to subdue other people's pet beasts was enough for him to dominate the world. The white cat was currently nestled obediently in Lin Jin's arms, rubbing its head against him nonstop. Evil Scholar was dumbfounded as he silently cursed the stupid cat. The cat had never been this obedient and adorable when it was with him. How could it change its temperament in Appraiser Lin's arms? Little did he know that Lin Jin already had the ability to intimidate beasts. After staying in the museum for several days, Lin Jin had absorbed quite a bit of the museum's aura. This aura was a great supplement to beasts, which was why the white cat was so docile and obedient. Hugging the white cat, Lin Jin pondered for a moment before taking out a pill. At this, the white cat stuck its tongue out and licked the pill. Lin Jin laughed heartily at this. You sure know what's good for you. Although Lin Jin should be able to help the white cat evolve without the help of pills, he was more confident with the help of pills. This pill was called a spirit gathering pill. It wasn't just any ordinary spirit gathering pill. Lin Jin had refined it using the museum's prescription, and its effects were at least 10 times stronger than those available on the market. Lin Jin had prepared this pill for Xiao Hua and the white ape. Now that Xiao Hua had absorbed the jade dragon's blood, his potential was much stronger than before. However, as Lin Jin had reached his limit, Xiao Hua's Dharma body needed to be nourished slowly. That was why he had refined some spirit-gathering pills in the museum. Now, he was giving one to the white cat to help it evolve. The pill's effect were too strong, so the cat could only lick it bit by bit. This would take some time, so Lin Jin stroked the cat's head as he approached Coffin Man. Coffin Man smiled at Lin Jin's approach. However, his smile didn't look much better than crying. The coffin was placed beside him. Ever since Madame Ghostchild severed Coffin Man's symbiosis under Lin Jin's guidance, Coffin Man no longer had to carry a coffin on his back all the time. This was something unimaginable in the past few decades. Based on this alone, Coffin Man considered Curator a great benefactor. Needless to say, Curator had basically saved his life. Although the person before him wasn't Curator, Curator's disciple still represented Curator. Appraiser Lin. Coffin Man called out. Lin Jin waved his hand. It's fine. I'll help you take a look at Zombie Cthulhu. Having said that, Lin Jin saw Coffin Man's stunned expression and knew he had let the cat out of the bag. This was Lin Jin's first time meeting Coffin Man, so he shouldn't have known his pet beast's name. However, this was an easy matter. Lin Jin could just pretend that Curator had told him about it, and he didn't even have to explain. Sure enough, Coffin Man figured out what was going on after some thought. However, the next second, Coffin Man tensed up again, because he saw Lin Jin trying to open the coffin with one hand. Coffin Man immediately stopped him. Appraiser Lin. Lin Jin turned to him in confusion. Yes, well, Coffin Man pondered for a moment before saying, my pet beast has an odd temper and tends to hurt people. Even as its blood contract owner, I'm often hurt by it. I'm worried that Appraiser Lin might get hurt because you don't know about it. At this, Lin Jin nodded with a smile. Thank you. Curator has already told me about Zombie Cthulhu's characteristics. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Since Lin Jin had put it that way, Coffin Man couldn't say anything else. However, he was worried that something might go wrong. After all, although Appraiser Lin was Curator's disciple, he was still too young. On the other hand, Madame Ghostchild shot Coffin Man a reassuring look. Old Coffin, this Appraiser Lin is very confident. He even knows your pet beast's name because Curator has personally instructed him on it. You just have to watch. At Madame Ghostchild's words, Coffin Man nodded. Still, he couldn't help but worry. After all, his Zombie Cthulhu was different from Evil Scholar's white cat. Meanwhile, Lin Jin was already holding the coffin lid with one hand. Exerting force, he forcefully opened it halfway. What strength! Everyone's eyes lit up. Coffin Man's coffin was obviously unusually heavy. Even if it was just a lid, it probably weighed around 200 to 300 caddies. Despite Lin Jin's frail physique, to think that he could open it with one hand. That was quite the strength. Little did they know that although Lin Jin had never cultivated any martial arts, he had tempered his physique with a vein strengthening method. His single arm strength was several times that of an average person. Once the coffin lid was opened, everyone turned to look at it. Coffin Man's pet beast was definitely the hot-tempered type. It was cruel and bloodthirsty. They could see this clearly. However, now that the coffin lid was open, it was extremely quiet inside. Due to the angle, no one could see what was inside the coffin. All they saw was Lin Jin tilting his head to take a look before saying, "Don't be so shy. Come, let me take a look." Chapter 265. There was still no movement from the coffin. But why did these words sound so familiar to Madame Ghostchild? Back in the visitation hall, Curator seemed to have said the same thing to his pet beast, Babyface Spider. As expected of Curator's disciple. Even the way they talk is the same, Madame Ghostchild mused. Lin Jin stared at the motionless coffin and said helplessly, "If you're not going to come out, I'll have to pull you out myself." Having said that, he reached into the coffin to grab it. This made everyone's scalps tingle. Black Crow had seen something like this before, so he was fine, but Evil Scholar felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Although he had never seen it with his own eyes, he knew that Coffin Man's pet beast was definitely an anomaly even among the mutated beasts. It was practically a monster. Yet, appraiser Lin wasn't the least bit afraid as he reached out to grab it. What kind of courage was this? What kind of spirit was this? Evil Scholar was instantly convinced. If he were in Lin Jin's shoes, he would never have done this. Even the white cat in Lin Jin's arms was so frightened that its fur stood on end. It didn't even dare to lick the pills as it stared at the coffin with fear in its eyes. Clearly, the thing inside had scared it out of its wits. Lin Jin caressed the cat's neck with his other hand and then reached out to grab one of the zombie Cthulhu's tentacles, trying to pull it out. However, the zombie Cthulhu was stubborn. No matter how Lin Jin pulled, it wouldn't come out. This was probably a problem with its personality. Lin Jin didn't want to force the issue. After all, he had observed everything he needed to. This zombie Cthulhu was truly one of the monsters in this world. Even to Lin Jin's eyes, this creature was truly hideous. It was no wonder why it was so introverted and didn't like to meet people. It was too ugly. However, its strength was undeniable. Compared to Madame Ghostchild's babyface spider, the zombie Cthulhu was only slightly weaker. Its biggest weapon was its tentacles, which could reach up to 100 feet in length when extended. These tentacles were incredibly sturdy like whips that could easily crush boulders. Not only that, but zombie Cthulhu also had another divine ability, but his old injuries had not healed, so he could not use it at all. Previously, Lin Jin had used its blood to appraise this monster, but now that he was touching it and seeing it with his own eyes, things were different. Strictly speaking, this zombie Cthulhu was in a serious condition. The symbiosis was broken to save Coffin Man, but things weren't looking so good for the zombie Cthulhu. Not only that, but this zombie Cthulhu's body was also incomplete. A few of its tentacles seemed to have been forcefully torn off by something, just like a human's arm being torn off. All these years, this guy must have suffered a lot and suffered a lot. Lin Jin reached out and patted zombie Cthulhu's head. Then, with a sweep of his silver needles, they pierced several vital acupoints on his body. The effect was to relieve its pain. Every time this fellow attacked and waved the chained tentacles, it would tear open a wound. It hurt both others and itself. The battle with the old dragon earlier had added to its injuries. Although zombie Cthulhu didn't say anything, Lin Jin could tell. After a few injections, zombie Cthulhu visibly relaxed. Lin Jin patted him. "Wait here for a moment. I'll help this white cat evolve first, then I'll treat you." His tone was like that of an old friend. No one in the house dared to make a sound. Only then did Evil Scholar realize that Lin Jin was talking about helping the white cat evolve. Evil Scholar was immediately overwhelmed with excitement. The white cat was currently rank 3. If it evolved, wouldn't it reach rank 4? Compared to rank 3, rank 4 wasn't just a difference of one realm. In this world, pet beasts that could achieve rank 4 were few and far between. Taking a deep breath, Evil Scholar was filled with anticipation. If the white cat was rank 4, his ranking on the villainous experts leaderboard would definitely rise. Now, he didn't dare to disturb Lin Jin. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. The white cat had finally finished licking the spirit-gathering pill clean. Knowing that it was about time, Lin Jin began to stimulate the cat's organs and meridians. The next instant, the white cat visibly enlarged. In the blink of an eye, it grew to the size of a leopard. Then its fur fell off, its bones grew, and its eyes glowed green. Meow. With a meow, a shadow emerged from the white cat's body. Like a ferocious beast, it changed forms unpredictably. When the shadow appeared, many beasts in the royal city curled up in fear. The shadow changed into different forms, but the only thing that remained unchanged was its gigantic mouth. This mouth was like a bottomless black hole that could devour everything. Listening to the crisp sound of the white cat's bones changing, watching as its fur grew longer and its body changed, Black Crow exclaimed, "This is a complete transformation." When a pet beast evolved to rank 3, it would undergo a metamorphosis, but the same couldn't be said for rank 3 to rank 4. The white cat had clearly experienced this once before, but this time it underwent another metamorphosis. This could only mean that the person who helped the white cat evolve had a brilliant method. Black Crow recalled how difficult it must have been for his black falcon to evolve to rank 4. Saying it was difficult was an understatement. Back then, for a chance for his black falcon to evolve, Black Crow had to compete with dozens of other experts. Back then, blood flowed like a river, all for the sake of satisfying the rank 4 beast appraiser who helped the black falcon evolve. That wasn't all. Black Crow remembered clearly that when the rank 4 beast appraiser helped the black falcon evolve, the creature had a narrow escape. It went through 3 days and 3 nights, wailing in agony. Even so, the black falcon didn't undergo a complete transformation. Black Crow spent an entire year collecting all sorts of rare pills and spending God knows how much to help the black falcon evolve to rank 4. And looking at the scholar's white cat, it had actually reached the 4th level. The process was simple and easy. This was the effect of having an expert helping the pet evolve. Could it be that Appraiser Lin was even more skilled than that rank 4 beast appraiser? It must be the curator's guidance. Black Crow shook his head. There wasn't a single rank 4 beast appraiser in the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom. If there was, the kingdom's national strength would definitely be at the top of the intermediate countries. The other 3 people's gazes were burning with anticipation. Other than Evil Scholar, who was rubbing his hands together in excitement, the other 2 also had rank 4 pet beasts. But right now, they were just as curious. They had never seen an evolution method like this before. A long time ago, Madame Ghostchild and Coffin Man already had rank 4 pet beasts. But even their pet beast's evolution was a thrilling experience. Forget the amount of treasures they had to prepare, just the amount of caution and preparation they had to go through was nothing like what Lin Jean was doing right now. For Appraiser Lin to help the white cat evolve, it was as if he was doing something insignificant. All right. Just then, Lin Jean waved his hand. Silver needles flew out of the white cat's body like a ray of silver light and retracted. It was a beautiful sight to behold under the light. In this world, only the curator's faction was capable of this. Everyone was fascinated by the sight, musing about how amazing this silver needle technique was. It could be used to kill enemies, cure illnesses, and even help a pet evolve. It was simply amazing. In fact, even without Lin Jin's reminder, everyone knew that the white cat had evolved. The aura of a rank 4 pet beast was unmistakable. Chapter 266. The white cat's shadow was none other than the spirit devourer. Lin Jean looked at it, patted the cat's head, and said, "Keep it." The white cat obediently kept its shadow and shrunk back to its normal size. Looking at it now, it no longer looked as ferocious and terrifying as before. "Go on." Lin Jean waved. The white cat was reluctant to leave, but it nimbly hopped back into Evil Scholar's arms. While Evil Scholar was excited, he also had a feeling that if Lin Jean gave the order, would the white cat break its blood contract and betray him? It was highly possible. Evil Scholar had met all sorts of beast appraisers before, but this was his first time meeting someone like Curator and Appraiser Lin. Compared to these two, the other beast appraisers were nothing. After this incident, Evil Scholar finally understood why a cold and arrogant person like Black Crow would listen to Curator. He would have done the same if he were in Curator's shoes. Nowadays, the world was dominated by beasts. Controlling a beast was equivalent to controlling everything. Forget everything else. Just the villainous experts Evil Scholar interacted with on a daily basis had tried everything they could to help their pet beasts evolve, but to no avail. Some even begged for this, and that to evolve their pet beasts to rank 2. Why would they do that? Having a high-level pet beast meant that one's strength and status would naturally rise. There weren't many rules in the villainous community. Strength was the most important thing. Without strength, there was no point in talking. Evil Scholar was an example. He thought his pet beast reaching rank 3 was his limit. Now that it had reached rank 4, it was just as he said. From now on, he might not be in the top 20, but he would at least be in the top 50 on the Villainous Paths expert leaderboard. "Thank you for your help, Appraiser Lin." Evil Scholar stepped forward and bowed. Lin Jean nodded. Evil Scholar had come all the way here with Black Crow to help him. Moreover, the white cat spirit devourer showed signs of evolution too. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy. If he wanted to evolve from rank 4 to peerless, it wouldn't be that easy. Even if he knew how to do it, he couldn't do it right now. White Cat's matter was the last step, so it was not considered difficult. Zombie Cthulhu's matter was relatively more troublesome. Lin Jin had checked earlier. Zombie Cthulhu's limbs were missing, and he didn't come out. Other than the monster's personality, there was also another reason. Zombie Cthulhu's back had fused with the bottom of the coffin, so it was difficult for him to come out. Lin Jin had only just noticed this. Zombie Cthulhu's condition was clearly more troublesome. Instead of helping him evolve, Lin Jin was trying to save his life. Plus, it wouldn't be as quick as the White Cat. Even with Lin Jin's current skills, it would take him more than a month to cure Zombie Cthulhu's injuries. Lin Jin first performed a simple acupuncture on Zombie Cthulhu's pulse. When it was about time, he explained the situation to Coffin Man. I'll also call you Old Coffin. Zombie Cthulhu has been injured for decades, and it's definitely not going to be cured in a short period of time. Moreover, his injury is far more serious than that of the infant spider. If it weren't for this coffin made of 1,000-year-old locust wood, he wouldn't have been able to survive until now. Moreover, he has become a second nature of killing over the years and is now haunted by resentment. If you trust me, you can leave Zombie Cthulhu with me for at least half a month or at most a month. Then, you can come and retrieve him. If you trust me, leave Zombie Cthulhu with me for at least half a month or a month before you come back to retrieve him. By then, Zombie Cthulhu's old injuries should be healed. Now that Lin Jin was willing to treat his pet beast, how could he refuse? Appraiser Lin, you can leave Zombie Cthulhu here. Even I, Old Coffin, plan to stay by your side as long as you don't find me a bother, Coffin Man said sincerely. At this, Lin Jin shook his head. He hated trouble the most. Keeping Zombie Cthulhu around was for treatment, but keeping Coffin Man around would be bad. Moreover, Lin Jin had too many secrets, so it would be inconvenient to have someone around him. Seeing Lin Jin shake his head, Coffin Man was about to say something when Madame Ghostchild spoke up. Old Coffin, don't stay by Appraiser Lin's side and cause him trouble. Didn't you say that Old Turtle is dying? Let's go look for him. If we can find him in time, Curator or Appraiser Lin can still save him. Coffin Man's eyes lit up when he heard this. That's right, that old bastard Old Turtle has to hold on for me. Ghostchild, come with me to find him. If he finds out about your current situation, he'll be ecstatic. Black Crow and Evil Scholar were tactful. Appraiser Lin clearly preferred peace and quiet. Now that their business was done, it was time for them to leave. Moreover, Evil Scholar had achieved his goal. After his pet beast evolved, there were still many things he had to do, so he couldn't stay here any longer. And so, the two got up to leave. This was exactly what Lin Jin wanted. My friends, we're friends now. If there's anything you need, feel free to look for me. Or, you can look for Curator when the visitation hall is open. Lin Jin got up and saluted them. Before the four of them left, Coffin Man touched the coffin and said a few words to Zombie Cthulhu before leaving reluctantly. Although it was already late, no one could stop the four of them from leaving the city. As they walked, Evil Scholar was all smiles. He had gained the most out of all of them this time. To be honest, Curator's supernatural powers are unfathomable. I didn't expect his disciple to be this powerful as well. This has truly been an eye-opener. Curator is elusive and mysterious, but his disciple is easy to find. If there's nothing else to do in the future, we should get to know Appraiser Lin better. Evil Scholar's words were the same thought shared by all four of them. Even Black Crow and Madame Ghostchild, who were admitted into the visitation hall, shared the same thought. The reason was simple. Before the Curator, they trembled in fear. Even though the Curator's tone was gentle and kind at times, he still exuded an intimidating aura that terrified them. But Lin Jin was different. He gave off a sense of closeness. It was as if one was a prodigious son that one could only look up to while the other was a mortal that one could befriend or even call brother. With Appraiser Lin's skills, he's already at the level of a rank 4 beast appraiser. At this moment, Black Crow seemed to have thought of something and spoke. That's right. Being able to promote a rank 3 beast to rank 4 means that he's a rank 4 beast appraiser. But from the beast tattoo on Appraiser Lin's sleeve, he's only a rank 2 beast appraiser, Evil Scholar added. It's all because this Jade Dragon Kingdom is trash. The strongest beast appraiser in the Beast Appraisal Association is only at rank 3. Now, it all depends on whether Appraiser Lin is willing to help. If Appraiser Lin is willing to help, Jade Dragon Kingdom will definitely be able to become one of the top countries in the future, Coffin Man said. The few of them nodded in agreement. Chapter 267. Back to Lin Jin. After leaving Zombie Cthulhu behind and waiting for Black Crow and the others to leave, Lin Jin found his surroundings much quieter. Ever since he entered the royal capital, Lin Jin felt like he had been constantly on the move. He was either ambushed, assassinated, or dueled with others. Now that everything was settled, Lin Jin heaved a sigh of relief. He could finally relax. Dueling with the old dragon was dangerous, but it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Lin Jin had gained a lot this time. Just the fact that Xiaohua could use the old dragon's blood to cleanse his bone marrow and condense a yin-yang dharma body was a huge win for Lin Jin. If this had happened anywhere else, no 5th-rank dragon would have been injured, which would have greatly reduced its strength. Moreover, this dragon had lived for more than 400 years and was almost a divine dragon. Any other dragon would never be able to condense a yin-yang dharma body. How strong was a yin-yang dharma body? Lin Jin wasn't too sure himself, but he was sure that while Xiaohua was still rank 4, he could already go toe-to-toe with weaker rank 5 beasts. This was the strength of a dharma body. Other than that, he could control ice and flames at will. Just like what Lin Jin had heard, Xiaohua's wolf howl could stir up the clouds and cover the sun. Which other pet beast would be able to do this? Being invincible is so lonely. Lin Jin caressed Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua was now about the same size as the white cat and was adorable. However, this was only temporary. After some time, Xiaohua would return to his original size once his spirit energy was replenished. White Ape was now like a human, sitting at the side and reading a book. This guy hadn't cultivated into a human form yet, but he could already speak. It was truly amazing. Being able to speak meant a lot. In terms of intelligence, White Ape had improved significantly. Speaking of which, Lin Jin had to thank Wu Qian from Cloud Sect. Thinking of this old Taoist, Lin Jin remembered his promise to the man. After a moment's thought, he decided to go now. He was in good spirits anyway, and he didn't plan to stay in the royal capital any longer. Now that He Yu's curse had been broken, and He Qing and Lu Bin's promise had been fulfilled, there was no point in him staying here any longer. More importantly, Lin Jin didn't really like Jade Dragon Emperor He Qian. His Majesty was scheming and unscrupulous. Lin Jin didn't want to have anything to do with him, so it was best to leave as soon as possible. Before he left, he naturally had to settle the matter with the old Taoist. White Ape, carry the coffin. Let's go. Lin Jin left without delay. The coffin was huge and heavy. As a grassy continent beast, White Ape only needed to grow a little larger to carry it. Otherwise, it would have taken a lot of effort to carry the coffin away. After leaving the inn, Lin Jin knew that someone was observing them from the shadows. It must be the Emperor's spies. Ignoring them, Lin Jin had White Ape carry the coffin while Xiaohua lay on top of it. Lin Jin followed behind. Lin Jin wasn't familiar with the road, but White Ape did. Even if it was dark, he was afraid of being seen. Lin Jin wasn't afraid of danger, but he was afraid of scaring people. A large white ape that was taller than a normal person by more than a head, carrying a coffin on the street. Even the most courageous person would be scared out of their wits if they saw it. Hence, Lin Jin used the nebula barrier technique. He learned to cast a small camouflage. With a flick of his finger, he pierced a needle into White Ape's body. This way, most people wouldn't be able to see it. Lin Jin didn't need to use the needle himself, and just needed to adjust his spirit energy. This was a skill-based spell. It wasn't difficult as long as one understood the rules and spirit energy. Lin Jin didn't know how to do it before, but after studying the nebula barrier, he gained some understanding. Of course, Lin Jin felt like he only knew the tip of the iceberg. But even so, it was enough to fool the naked eye of mortals. Truth be told, Lin Jin had heard about cultivating this and that, and cultivating blood contracts. But it wasn't until he studied the nebula barrier that he understood the true essence of cultivation and the mysteries of spells. Although the path of immortality had fallen and spirit energy had collapsed, Lin Jin didn't seek to become an immortal. It was enough for him to increase his cultivation and master some spells. As for the rest, he would leave it to fate. Just like his visit to old Taoist Wu Qian, Lin Jin felt that it was an opportunity. To the old Taoist, Lin Jin was his opportunity and vice versa. To Lin Jin, Wu Qian from Cloud Sect was also an opportunity for Lin Jin's cultivation journey. With White Ape leading the way in camouflage, Lin Jin easily reached his destination. However, while Lin Jin didn't know about this, the spies the Emperor had planted in the city were startled. Emperor He Qian had long taken control of the inn where Lin Jin and the others were staying. Although He Qian had decided not to disturb Lin Jin and the villainous experts, it was still necessary to keep an eye on them. This wasn't necessarily out of bad intentions. If they had any requests, he could satisfy them at once and provide them with assistance. When Lin Jin stepped out of the door earlier, some sentries had already noticed him. But who would have thought that after taking a few steps with the coffin-carrying White Ape, Lin Jin's silhouette would mysteriously fade away as if blending into the darkness. The sentries immediately chased after them, but they couldn't see them anymore. Their movements were swift. Logically speaking, no matter which direction they went, they should be able to see them. No matter how fast they were, it was impossible to lose sight of them in the blink of an eye. Frustrated, the sentries had no choice but to report the situation to their superiors. Lin Jin was obviously unaware of this. By now, he was following White Ape all the way to the abandoned courtyard where Old Taoist was staying. There was no one living in this area. It could be said to be incomparably quiet and abnormally bleak. However, at the entrance of the courtyard, through the dilapidated walls, Lin Jin could smell a fragrant aroma. The aroma of meat mixed with the aroma of wine. He could even hear people talking. One of them was calm, while the other was trying to escape. Lin Jin knew they were Old Taoist and the Monkey Demon. Taoist Wu Qian, Lin Jin is here to visit, Lin Jin announced from outside. Coming, coming. A voice came from inside the courtyard. Coming, coming. Soon, the door opened, and Old Taoist personally came to open it. Lin Jin saluted him. Taoist Wu Qian, I'm here on Curator's orders. Curator is busy, so he can't make it in time. Please forgive me. Wu Qian knew that the person before him was the mysterious expert's disciple, so he didn't dare to be rude. Although he was a little disappointed, it wasn't that Lin Jin was being rude. He just felt like he had missed out on an opportunity. After all, if Wu Qian could meet that mysterious expert and ask him for advice on cultivation, he would surely benefit greatly and even improve tremendously. What a pity. Wu Qian was a wily old fox, so he could only keep this thought to himself. He wouldn't say it out loud, nor could he. It's fine, it's fine. Appraiser Lin, please come in. Old Taoist politely invited Lin Jin in. Then, he was startled to see White Ape carrying a coffin behind him. Old Taoist was stunned. Lin Jin saluted him. I was going to leave, but before I left, I wanted to meet Taoist Wu Qian, so I brought my luggage with me. This was luggage. All right, whatever you say. Old Taoist invited the guest in. White Ape placed the coffin in the courtyard, since it was huge anyway. With Lin Jin's permission, he sat down with the Monkey Demon and started chatting. Xiao Huo was sleeping on top of the coffin at first, but a slit opened up on the coffin, revealing a feeler with an eyeball. It looked like a large snail's feeler, soft and sensitive. Chapter 268. His antennae darted around, seemingly curious yet cautious and afraid at the same time. By now, Lin Jin had taken a seat. Due to the dilapidated courtyard, the house was too dilapidated to move in. Hence, Lin Jin and Old Taoist sat in the yard, using rocks as stools. Several dishes were placed on top of a wooden stool. Only the stewed meat was served in a bowl, while the others were served in oiled paper and leaves. Lin Jin could tell that this Old Taoist had great taste in food. Even in such an environment, he was able to gather so much food. There was also wine. A jar of aged wine had been opened, and its aroma wafted through the air. Old Taoist switched to a clean porcelain bowl and filled it up for Lin Jean. "Appraiser Lin, I don't have anything good here. If you don't mind, you could try the dishes and wine." Old Taoist Wu Qian didn't feel awkward at all. He knew that if it were the curator here, he wouldn't be able to talk so freely. The curator was dignified and intimidating, while Appraiser Lin was much more gentle and refined. "You're welcome, Taoist. I'm here on the curator's orders to have a chat with you," Lin Jean said as he picked up the bowl and took a sip. The wine wasn't bad. It was comparable to the famous brews in the city's restaurants. Lin Jean started the conversation by saying this: "I was fated to witness the curator's supernatural powers that day, so I've been thinking a lot these days. I've been harboring questions for years, and I need to get them out." Wu Qian took a sip as well. Lin Jean smiled. "Feel free to speak your mind, Taoist." "All right." Wu Qian gave it some thought. "My master is Mount Tian's Cloud sect. This sect was in its heyday 1,000 years ago, but the path of immortality had fallen 1,000 years ago. But back then, there were still some powerful cultivators who could ride the clouds and cast magical spells. They were free and unfettered, cultivating the path of immortality. But after my master, Taoist Hang, Cloud sect population had withered, and there were only 2 or 3 of them left. Pet beasts are popular now, but I'm still cultivating the ancient way. But as time goes by, my cultivation hasn't improved at all, and I'm at a loss for what to do." Wu Qian narrated with a gloomy expression. The hardships he suffered over the years were nothing. More importantly, he had lost his goal. If one didn't even know what to cultivate, wouldn't one be at a loss? That day, when I saw a curator use the nebula barrier, I was shocked. I didn't think that there would still be a capable cultivator in this world who could use such a technique. In the Taoist books, it is said that the nebula barrier can change the sky and the stars. Ancient almighty beings were able to set up a country with a single thought, changing the sun and the moon and changing day to night. Curator may not be as powerful as the ancient almighty beings, but his cultivation is still profound. This humble Taoist was worried that there would be no one to guide me on the path of cultivation, which is why I asked Curator to give me some pointers. This humble Taoist would like to ask, would there still be a day when I cultivate according to the immortal Tao? When old Taoist Wu Qian asked this question, his eyes were filled with anticipation, like a lost person waiting for guidance. This problem was a little big. If Lin Jean wasn't sure himself, how could he give an answer? Well, Lin Jean pondered for a moment. Based on the current situation, it was an indisputable fact that the immortal Tao had fallen. Just like this old Taoist heritage, after 1,000 years, it still ended up in such a miserable state. Hence, after some thought, Lin Jean answered honestly, "It's hard for me to say if there will be a day when I cultivate according to the immortal Tao. It's the same even if Curator is here. Although you saw Curator cast his spell that day, you didn't know he was actually skilled in beast appraising. In essence, we're just beast appraisers. According to your Taoist teachings, we should follow the laws of nature. Now that beasts are in charge, why must we continue down this path? I see that Taoist priest also has a monkey demon by his side. I believe that Cloud sect must have a similar cultivation method. Why don't we study it? As for the immortal Tao, we can continue cultivating it. Coincidentally, I also have a few cultivation techniques here. We can learn from each other and improve together." Lin Jin's answer was satisfactory. Old Taoist Wu Qian's eyes lit up at this. He knew that the laws of nature weren't something he, Lin Jin, or even the curator could explore. Just as Lin Jin said, since beasts were in charge, they should just follow the laws of nature. Next, Lin Jin explained visualization to the old Taoist. The old Taoist listened attentively. After that, Lin Jin talked about inner breathing. The old Taoist also had a corresponding technique. He compared it with Lin Jin's and lost. Obviously, the inner breathing technique that Lin Jin obtained from the Museum of Deadly Beasts was more powerful and orthodox. The old Taoist memorized it all. As for the vein strengthening formula, the old Taoist didn't really understand it. That was normal. After all, the vein-strengthening formula had to be used in conjunction with the pulse-seeking technique. Old Taoist didn't know much about acupuncture, so he naturally wouldn't understand it. Hence, Lin Jin didn't explain much about the vein-strengthening formula. Since Lin Jin had explained quite a bit, Old Taoist couldn't just freeload either. Hence, he took out his Cloud Sex secret cultivation method. It was mainly about the Edict Amulet. Lin Jin wanted to know more about this, so he listened attentively. Speaking of which, what Lin Jin gave Old Taoist Wu Qian were mostly methods to condense one's physical body, psyche, and spirit energy. The Edict Amulet that the Old Taoist mentioned was a proper Taoist spell. Lin Jin was a perceptive person, so after listening to it once, he was enlightened. The so-called Edict Amulet was mostly written with one's own cultivation and spirit energy. Usually, it was cast by borrowing strength. If one wanted to cast a lightning spell, they could borrow the power of a thunder deity. There were many different thunder deities in Taoism, and some could borrow heavenly thunder. However, this was too mysterious and difficult to follow a set pattern. When Old Taoist talked about his area of expertise, his eyes lit up, and he couldn't stop talking. In between, the Old Taoist drank wine and ate meat. He was clearly in high spirits. Everyone knows how powerful our Cloudlock Monastery's edicts were in the past. It's just that we didn't last long. In this humble Taoist generation, we can't even write a proper edict talisman. It's a shame. We can only rely on what we have. The edict talisman we gave to the White Ape was written by my Grandmaster. At this point, Old Taoist shook his head, hating himself for not living up to his expectations. Lin Jin was pondering over the edict Old Taoist had given him. It was indeed a profound technique, but Lin Jin had experience studying the nebula barrier, so he was inspired. Take a look and see if this is how a 5-elemental fire amulet should be written. Lin Jin dipped his chopsticks into some wine and began writing on the stone slab. Old Taoist Wu Qian had drunk quite a bit, so he was a little tipsy. He craned his neck to watch Lin Jin write the edict on the stone slab. One glance, and he was stunned. He rubbed his eyes. Why does it feel like there's a ball of fire? Wu Qian thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. When he looked again, it was real. Not only was there a ball of fire, but it was actually burning. Forget Old Taoist Wu Qian. Even Lin Jin was startled. He had just finished writing the edict and tried to activate it. To his surprise, the stone slab actually burst into flames. Moments later, the stone slab was charred black and cracked. This fire was no small matter. Chapter 269. Forget Wu Qian. Even White Ape and the monkey demon who were chatting in the yard were startled. The tentacles in the coffin immediately retracted as if they were frightened. Xiaohua, on the other hand, wore an odd expression as if he was intrigued. This, Wu Qian spilled the wine in his bowl. This is a 5-elemental fire amulet. Wu Qian put down his bowl and finally said. He was astounded. The 5-elemental fire amulet was an edict that had been passed down in Cloud Sect for generations. No one in his master's generation had been able to cast it. Although the edict had been passed down, no one could write a real 5-elemental fire amulet. But today, Lin Jin, who was writing a 5-elemental fire amulet for the first time, managed to do it. Moreover, he activated it and drew in the yang flames. It took Wu Qian a long time to come to his senses. He looked at the burning edict and asked, Appraiser Lin, have you learned the edict script for the 5-elemental fire amulet before? Truth be told, Lin Jin was surprised too. He shook his head. Indeed, he had never learned it before. However, he had a rough idea of why the edict he wrote was effective. Because of his earlier study of the edict, Lin Jin realized that part of the edict was about borrowing strength. Old Taoist Wu Qian mentioned that he had been writing for decades without success. Lin Jin wondered if there was a problem with the borrowing strength. Hence, he changed some parts of the edict script, and it worked. Wu Qian was still in shock and confusion when Lin Jin said with a smile, Sir, take a closer look at this edict script. What's different from what you know? This was a very obvious hint. At this, the old Taoist quickly took a closer look and realized where the problem lay. The 5-elemental fire amulet edict Lin Jin wrote was slightly different from what he knew. It was an order from the Lord to borrow fire to defend against enemies. Instead of the 5-elemental fire god that he was familiar with, the edict was written in several other unfamiliar symbols. Appraiser Lin, which divine lord's name are you writing? Wu Qian couldn't figure out, so he humbly asked for guidance. Lin Jin smiled. It's not a divine lord. It's the name of my pet beast. What? Pet beast? Wu Qian was shocked. Lin Jin beckoned for Xiao Hua to come over. Xiao Hua was currently the size of a cat, covered in fiery fur that gave him a spiritual aura. This was the Dharmakaya. Wu Qian stared at Xiao Hua's fire wolf, unable to believe that the fire in Lin Jin's 5-elemental fire amulet was borrowed from this fire wolf. Lin Jin knew he succeeded not because he was more familiar with the fire amulet than Old Taoist, but because he had grasped the key to it. Old Taoist's fire amulet had been useless because it didn't contain any yang fire spirit energy. It wasn't like the edict amulet passed down by Old Taoist's ancestors. Just like the one Old Taoist used before, even if the edict amulet contained the corresponding supernatural powers, it wouldn't work if Lin Jin had to write a new one. The key to writing a new one was that it couldn't borrow the fire god's yang fire spirit energy. Since that was the case, Lin Jin figured he might as well go against common sense. After all, the path of immortality had fallen and the 5-elemental fire god might no longer exist. How was he supposed to borrow the Divine Lord's power by using his name? Lin Jin figured that a Divine Lord must have many Dharmakaya for others to borrow power from and worship them. Since that was the case, why couldn't Xiao Hua do the same? Hence, he borrowed Xiao Hua's yang fire spirit energy, and it worked. This was what Lin Jin had learned. Without holding back, he told Old Taoist Wu Qian everything. The latter was dumbfounded. At first, it sounded like a fantasy story, but the more he thought about it, the more reasonable it seemed. Moreover, he also discovered something that made him feel a little terrified. Appraiser Lin's pet beast was a pet beast with a Dharmakaya? Wasn't this a little too ridiculous? Others might not know what a Dharmakaya was, but how could Old Taoist Wu Qian not know? After all, he was an orthodox descendant of an immortal sect. Putting everything else aside, just in the past of his cloud sect alone, there had been more than one expert who managed to cultivate a Dharma body. Thus, he had a deep understanding of Dharma bodies. To think that he would actually get to witness a Dharmakaya with his own eyes. But the problem was, the pet beast with the Dharmakaya was a pet beast. This was something the Old Taoist never expected. What a waste. This was what Wu Qian was feeling right now. However, Wu Qian would never say this out loud. Moreover, he was now extremely impressed by Lin Jin, musing, as expected of an expert's disciple. Although the 5-elemental fire amulet wasn't a profound spell, it was almost extinct at this stage. Who would have thought that Appraiser Lin would come up with another method to cast it? This was what an expert should be like. Wu Qian immediately taught Lin Jin the writing method of another edict amulet left behind in Cloud Sect. Previously, it was the 5-elemental fire amulet. This time, it was the 5-elemental thunder amulet. Cloud Sect only had these two types of 5-elemental amulets. However, Lin Jin couldn't cast the 5-elemental thunder amulet now because he didn't have anything to borrow. Unless he could find a pet beast with a thunder attribute and a Dharmakaya, he would have to rely on it. The two chatted as they ate. Deep into the night, the dried wine and meat were all gone. They were talking about the study of pet beasts, including monsters. Appraiser Lin, the beast energy formation that Curator gave me is truly amazing. I've already let the monkey demon cultivate it. Wu Qian suddenly changed the topic to the monkey demon. Lin Jin knew what Wu Qian was thinking, so he smiled. Let me take a look at that monkey demon for you, Taoist. Wu Qian was overjoyed and immediately called the monkey demon over. The monkey demon was quite restless. Having been chatting earlier, he was now dozing off out of boredom. Upon hearing the old Taoist call for him, the monkey demon shook his head and came over reluctantly. Let Appraiser Lin take a look, the old Taoist said with a straight face. Having been trained by the old Taoist for so many years, the monkey demon knew etiquette, so he went over to bow. Greetings, appraiser Lin. Lin Jin nodded. With a flick of his fingers, a flying needle pierced into the monkey demon's acupoint. Lin Jin had perfected this acupuncture technique so much that the monkey demon couldn't even tell that Lin Jin had probed his acupoint. Lin Jin clicked his tongue in wonder at the monkey demon's state. Despite being only a rank 2 monster, he had mastered the art of transfiguration, refined his hyoid bone, and even understood human speech. Impressive. But then again, Lin Jin remembered that the old Taoist cloud sect had an edict amulet specifically for monsters to refine their hyoid bone and transform into humans. That was why the monkey demon could transform into a human and speak at rank 2. From a certain perspective, the old Taoist cloud sect must have been an impressive immortal sect in the past. By now, Lin Jin had recorded the monkey demon into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. The monkey demon's information was extremely detailed. After a glance, Lin Jin mused that this monkey demon was a rare monster with great potential. Besides potential, the monkey demon had accumulated a lot of experience and was already showing signs of evolution. Since that was the case, Lin Jin might as well do the monkey a favor and help it evolve. To Lin Jin, promoting a rank 1 to rank 2, or from rank 2 to rank 3, was a piece of cake. Boom! An aura emanated from the monkey demon's body. Chapter 270. The old Taoist was naturally shocked by the aura of a third-rank demon beast that emanated from the monkey demon's body. How could Wu Qian not tell that the monkey demon's sudden evolution had something to do with appraiser Lin? But what made him ashamed was that Wu Qian couldn't tell how the monkey demon evolved at all. This was what it meant to be an expert. Not only was Lin Jin's beast appraising skills unparalleled at such a young age, but he was also incredibly perceptive when it came to cultivating their cloud sex edict amulet. Wu Qian felt like he had lived his life for decades in vain. Noticing the dejected look on the old Taoist's face, Lin Jin gave it some thought and comforted him. Taoist, please don't think too much about it. Beast appraising and treating is my specialty, and the monkey demon already showed signs of evolution, so I was just taking advantage of the situation. As for the edict amulet, it was just a random idea I came up with on a whim. Random? When it came to cultivation, how could it be explained by guessing? Wu Qian knew Lin Jin was trying to console him, and he was grateful for the gesture. Wu Qian flashed a carefree smile, his initial gloominess and disappointment gone. I met this monkey demon by chance during my travels. I taught him spells and gave him the edict amulet. He has been with me for more than 10 years now and has become my only disciple. Thanks to appraiser Lin's help, he managed to evolve. From now on, it'll be more convenient for us to traverse the martial world. Even if we encounter danger, we'll be able to handle it. The old Taoist was telling the truth. Back when they were rank 2, they had to be more cautious. If they encountered troublesome opponents, they would tolerate them as much as they could. Now that the monkey demon was at the 3rd rank, there was no need for it to endure anything that it could not endure anymore. Under normal circumstances, a 3rd-rank demonic beast could deal with it easily. In addition, it had learned the beast energy training art, so the monkey demon's ability was probably much greater than before. Knowing that Lin Jin was his benefactor, the monkey demon knelt down and kowtowed to him. Lin Jin was reminded of the Taoist temple deep in the mountains in Shanger's hometown. That was where Shanger and Little Five were taught their cultivation. Lin Jin had planned to explore the place, but since he met old Taoist Wu Qian, he figured he might as well ask. At that moment, Lin Jin saluted him and asked, "There's something I'd like to ask you, sir." Having witnessed Lin Jin's capabilities, Wu Qian didn't dare to accept his courtesy. He quickly bowed in return. "I wouldn't dare. Appraiser Lin, feel free to ask me anything in the future. If I know anything, I'll answer you truthfully." "All right." Lin Jin asked if he knew of a Taoist temple in Mount Qixia. He didn't know the name of the temple, but he was sure that it contained a mantra that could turn wild beasts into monsters. A Taoist temple in Seven Cloud Mountain. Old Taoist priest Wu Qian thought for a while and shook his head. "I know a thing or two about the Tao sects in this world, but I've never heard of any famous Dao sects in Seven Cloud Mountain. However, if it's something that can make wild beasts enter the Dao and become demons, it must be something extraordinary, but I really don't know. Lin Jin was surprised, but on second thought, it made sense. Although old Taoist was a Taoist, he didn't know where all the sects were located, so it was normal for there to be some he didn't know. So, Lin Jin could only find the time to go there himself. Lin Jin had gained a lot from meeting old Taoist Wu Qian. Not only did he learn about cultivation in this world, but he also obtained the secrets of the Edict Amulet from old Taoist. If used properly, the 5-elemental fire amulet would be of great use. Before he knew it, a night had passed. Seeing that the sky was starting to brighten, Lin Jin knew it was about time, so he got up to bid farewell. Old Taoist knew that all good things must come to an end, so he stood up to send Lin Jin off. Appraiser Lin is currently in Maple City. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely pay you a visit. Wu Qian saluted Lin Jin at the entrance of the yard. Lin Jin smiled. If you come, I'll be sure to welcome you with open arms. Farewell. Farewell. After sending old Taoist Wu Qian off at the entrance, Lin Jin led White Ape away while the latter carried the coffin on his shoulder. About 10 steps later, when they were a short distance away, Wu Qian somehow saw Lin Jin and White Ape's silhouettes gradually fade away. Old Taoist was stunned. Is this a smokescreen? Old Taoist's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately chased after Lin Jin. He was fast, and his body was tougher than most youngsters, but after a while, he couldn't catch up to Lin Jin, nor could he see anyone. Old Taoist immediately stomped his feet in frustration. I didn't expect Appraiser Lin to know how to use smokescreen. This spell can only be cast with an amulet. I should have learned a thing or two from him. What a shame, what a shame. Old Taoist was filled with regret. But on second thought, he burst into laughter. Look at my brain. If I wanted to find Appraiser Lin, I could have gone to Maple City in the future. Why did I have to do this? Why did I have to do this? Having said that, old Taoist returned home in a carefree manner. Even if he had to go to Maple City, old Taoist wasn't in a hurry. Taoism was all about fate. Now that he had missed this opportunity, it meant that this was destined to happen. Hence, there was no need to force it. It wouldn't be too late to go when he felt like it. To think that I, Wu Qian, have been cultivating in a Taoist school since I was young. Up until now, I've been lacking in spell casting and cultivation. I don't know anything about immortality, nor do I know anything about supernatural powers. All I know are some minor spells. I used to think that I was wasting my time and my days were wasted. But now that I've met Lin Jin, I finally understand. His confidence had been rekindled. By then, Lin Jin had already left the city. Although he hadn't been in the royal capital for long, Lin Jin had learned a lot, especially in his spell-casting cultivation. He had improved tremendously. Using rapid travel, no matter if he was on a mountain path or a flat plain, Lin Jin could travel at lightning speed. He was even faster than a horse carriage. But halfway there, Lin Jin suddenly stopped and let out a long sigh. I forgot, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. That Lu Bin said he would give me an eagle as a form of transportation. I've helped him out so much that I forgot to collect this last bit of compensation. Lin Jin couldn't be bothered to turn back now. Knowing Lu Bin's character, he would probably send him an eagle beast in the future. Anyway, Lin Jin was craving that eagle beast. Riding on it, one could imagine how fast it would be. However, even if he had an eagle beast, he wouldn't be able to use it. White Ape aside, the coffin that contained zombie Cthulhu wasn't something an eagle beast could carry. It was better to continue walking. Meanwhile, Lu Bin had been released from the imperial prison by Emperor He Qian. Previously, He Qian had imprisoned Lu Bin to protect him. Now that the Jade Dragon deity was dead and Minister Yu's faction had crumbled under He Qian's ruthless methods, Lu Bin was no longer in danger. In the end, Lu Bin didn't know anything. After spending a few days in the imperial prison, when he was released, he realized that everything had been resolved. He first went to visit the sixth princess, Hiyu. Hiyu had woken up and seemed to be doing well. Her coming-of-age ceremony was in 2 days, and it seemed like there wouldn't be any problems. Even if he had to be cautious, As long as she made it through the ceremony, the curse within her would be completely removed. Lubin was obviously overjoyed. He was happy from the bottom of his heart. As for how He recovered, Lubin discussed it with He Ching and learned from other sources that the mysterious expert curator appeared in person. Chapter 271. Lubin was indignant. He really wanted to meet the curator, but he had missed such a good opportunity, especially after he heard from others that the curator had led villainous experts to slay the Jade Dragon deity. Although he didn't witness it with his own eyes, he knew that it must have been dangerous. But at least it was over. Lubin went to look for Lin Jin, but he couldn't find him. Lubin didn't think too much about it, since the curator was the one who settled the matter. If Lin Jin wasn't around, he must have left with the curator or returned to Maple City. So, after he used coming-of-age ceremony, he would pay Maple City a visit and thank him. Lubin didn't forget his promise. He immediately picked an eagle beast, planning to personally deliver it to Maple City in a few days. Inside the sixth princess he used chamber, Hiyu, who could now walk on her feet, freshened up and went outside. Hiyu had learned about what happened from He Ching and Lubin. She also knew who saved her this time. Although the dust had settled, she still found it hard to believe. Uncle Lu, do you think the matter has been resolved so perfectly? Hiyu asked Lubin, who had come to visit. Lubin smiled. I don't believe it either, but that's the truth. My lord, you've been carrying this curse for so many years, and now you're finally free. This is a joyous occasion. I'll definitely make sure your coming-of-age ceremony is done properly. Hiyu smiled. Father is already making preparations for it. Uncle Lu, you could just come when the time comes. Also, don't call me Lord anymore. Even though the curse had been lifted, Hiyu still felt melancholy. But that was just her personality. The pessimism from before had vanished from her eyes and was replaced by hope. Back then, your mother was the valley master of her valley. I was greatly indebted to her and even became her disciple. You're the valley master's only daughter, and I inherited my mother's legacy. I address you as my lord because I don't forget how you saved my life back then. Having said that, Lubin added, but since His Majesty has already made preparations, I'll just have a meal with you. Of course. At this time, he revealed a smile that someone her age should have. Seeing this, Lubin was even more gratified. He thought to himself that for this smile, he would be willing to give up his life. Next, Hiyu inquired about the curator and Lin Jin. It was a pity that Lubin didn't know much. Fortunately, seventh princess He Ching arrived at that moment and saved Lubin from his predicament. Lin Jin had now arrived at a village. The royal capital was several hundred miles away from Maple City. Riding on an eagle beast, it only took him a few hours to reach his destination. But if they walked on land, it would take 2 days. Even if Lin Jin could move like the wind, it was impossible for him to reach his destination in 1 day. Moreover, this was his first time, so it was inevitable that he would take some detours. Sometimes, he would even take the wrong path. When they arrived at the village before dark, they finally had a place to rest. However, the village didn't look very big. From a hillside to the bottom, there were only about 30 houses. It was a very small village. As he was carrying a coffin with him, Lin Jin couldn't stay in the village for the night. Maintaining camouflage was troublesome too. Moreover, Lin Jin found an abandoned mansion not too far away from the village, so it would be more convenient for him to rest here. As for food, with Xiaohua and White Ape around, Lin Jin didn't have to worry about it. He just had to catch some wild animals. It was now sunset. Lin Jin was exhausted from the journey, so he found a stone slab in the abandoned mansion and sat down cross-legged to meditate. What he used was naturally the breathing technique. As of late, Lin Jin had been using this method a lot, so he had gained some experience with it. After entering a meditative state and regulating his breathing, despite the lack of natural spirit energy, he was able to calm his mind. Sitting cross-legged for a few hours was no different from sleeping for the entire night. While Lin Jin was resting, there was a commotion in this small village. Lin Jin had used camouflage on his way here, so no one in the village knew that an outsider had entered nor did they know that he had gone to the abandoned mansion. And that was where the problem lay. After nightfall, not only were the dogs barking louder in the village, but some people also saw shadows moving inside the mansion. In this small village, this matter spread like wildfire. What's going on? There's a commotion inside that mansion. This is scary. Don't talk nonsense. How many years has it been since that incident? How could there be any commotion? Don't scare yourself. It's true. I'm not lying. Go see for yourself if you don't believe me. This conversation came from the village chief's house. Soon, a few men mustered up their courage and came out. Because the abandoned mansion was halfway up the hill, they could see the situation inside with the help of the moonlight. Sure enough, there was a faint glow. Many people in the village gasped when they saw this. That house has been abandoned for many years. The people in the village would definitely not dare to go near it. Even outsiders would not go there. With such an anomaly today, I'm afraid that something bad is going to happen. An old man in the village frowned and said solemnly, "Don't tell me that the outsider's family is here to take our lives." Someone suddenly said. As soon as he said that, a gust of night wind blew, causing everyone to shiver and their faces to turn even paler. "Old Yang, don't *King talk nonsense," the village chief reprimanded. A few others chimed in. That's right. Even if they're here to claim our lives, they wouldn't have waited for so long. The man named Old Yang was unconvinced. All right, I misspoke, all right? Tell me then what's going on. No one could answer this rhetorical question. Even if the vengeful spirits of that family of foreigners come back, we are not afraid. Even in the past, our village did not do anything shameful. Instead, many people were implicated by that family and died mysteriously. However, this matter is strange, and we have to guard against it. Everyone, get some tools for self-defense, and then gather together. Even if the vengeful spirits come back, we have the advantage in numbers, so we are not afraid of them. At this time, the village chief made the final decision and set the tone. The 30 or so families in the village were already afraid. Now that they had a backbone, they did as they were told. Everyone prepared their weapons and brought pet beasts with them. Although there weren't any ferocious beasts, there were a few mastiffs. If a fight broke out, they wouldn't lose to lions, tigers, or jackals. Lin Jin was oblivious to the commotion in the village. He was currently in a deep state of meditation. If someone invaded the yard, he would know, but he couldn't sense anything more than a few hundred meters away. As for why there was a fire in the yard, it was because Xiaohua was playing on a withered tree in the yard. Xiaohua was already a Dharma body, so he had a yang fire spirit around him. From afar, one could see the glow of the fire. Time passed, and Xiaohua got bored. He landed and laid down beside Lin Jin. White Ape was already fast asleep. After carrying the coffin for an entire day, he was exhausted. After the third watch, Lin Jin abruptly opened his eyes. Chapter 272. Although he was in meditative state, Lin Jin had already spread his psyche around the yard. If someone approached, he would be alerted immediately. Just now, someone had approached. Could it be a villager? This was Lin Jin's first thought. At the same time, he glanced at the coffin and shook his head. If it was a villager, seeing this coffin might scare them away. It was better to hide it for now. At this thought, Lin Jin immediately took out a needle. Imbued with his spirit energy, he cast camouflage in the blink of an eye. This was the key to Lin Jin's spellcasting. Spirit energy alone wasn't enough, so he needed a magic tool. Those silver needles were the magic tools Lin Jin condensed. Once camouflage was cast, they couldn't be seen by the naked eye. Just as Lin Jin finished casting camouflage, he could hear footsteps outside clearly. Moments later, they stopped in front of the yard's door. Is this the place? Yes, this is the place. Looks like we're the first ones here. If we act earlier and get lucky, we might just be able to find the Beastmaster 4th scroll. All right, let's hurry up. I heard that the Beastmaster 4th scroll has a spirit of its own and will only reveal itself today. If we miss this chance, we'll have to wait another year. As they spoke, a few people with various pet beasts pushed open the door and entered. Although their conversation was hushed, it couldn't escape Lin Jin's ears. Beastmaster Fourth Scroll? Lin Jin pondered for a moment. Of course, he knew about the Beastmaster Scroll. It was a well-known cultivation method for pet beasts to form a blood contract. Once one's blood contract realm reached the fifth realm, one could begin cultivating the Beastmaster Scroll. The greatest use of this cultivation method was to fuse the pet beast and its master into one. In other words, the two could fuse into one. Lu Bin, for example, had never revealed his pet beast. It wasn't that he deliberately hid it or that he didn't have a pet beast. He did. Lu Bin's pet beast was a cloud sea scorpion at the peak of rank 3. It was invisible because Lu Bin cultivated the Beastmaster Scroll. With this, Lu Bin could fuse with his cloud sea scorpion to improve his physique. He could also use his pet beast's supernatural abilities. This was one of the most common techniques used by modern cultivators. Similarly, Minister Yu, whom Lin Jin had met before, used the Beastmaster Scroll to hide the coiling dragon on his body. Of course, there were those who didn't use it, such as Yi Yuzhou. This expert had a blood contract on the 8th realm and a dead pet beast. Lin Jin had met him many times, but he had never seen him use the Beastmaster Scroll. This was a personal preference. Just because Yi Yuzhou didn't use it didn't mean that he wouldn't. Currently, everyone knew that there were 3 volumes of the Beastmaster Scroll, each with different effects. The first volume was the easiest to cultivate, but after fusing with a pet beast, the user wouldn't be able to unleash much power, less than half. The second volume was much better. After fusing with a pet beast, the user could unleash more than 70% of a user's power. Naturally, 1 scroll was easy to find, but 3 scrolls were hard to find. The better it was, the more precious and rare it was. As far as Lin Jin knew, there were only 3 volumes of the Beastmaster Scroll. However, he had just heard about the 4th volume. Do you have the Beastmaster 4th Scroll? Lin Jin's curiosity was piqued. With camouflage, even if Lin Jin, Xiaohua, White Ape, and the Coffin were in this abandoned mansion, no one could see them. At least, these people who had just entered couldn't. The strongest of their pet beasts was only rank 3, while most of them were rank 2. They didn't have any unique bloodlines, so they couldn't see through Lin Jin's camouflage. However, some of their scents were hard to conceal, and this made these people's pet beasts restless. Quiet down. I heard that back then, the Guo family escaped here with the Beastmaster 4th Scroll and built a house here, planning to study it slowly. However, news of it leaked out, and they got themselves killed. The entire family died in one night, and ever since then, the surrounding farmers have been calling this place a haunted house. If you ask me, I don't think it's a big deal. After all, these people died a violent death, and if their resentment turned into malevolence, their pet beasts would definitely feel uneasy, so it's not a big deal. With that said, the others couldn't be bothered to care about their pet beasts. Lin Jin was still wondering if they would be exposed because of their scent. But before he could worry, the other party had already come up with an excuse. Great. Very powerful. Interesting. Lin Jin had been listening attentively. Just by listening to their conversation, he managed to glean a story from their conversation. And this story was just as interesting. White Ape had woken up too and was listening with great interest. Lin Jin shushed him, hinting for him to keep quiet. Lin Jin counted. There were 4 people there. All of them had cold, menacing looks on their faces. Lin Jin could tell that they weren't good people just by looking at their faces. The 4 of them began looking around the house, searching for something. The Guo family must have been quite rich back then. To think they could build such a nice mansion in this rundown place. Who knows what they were thinking? I heard that the Beastmaster 4th Scroll is magical. It only reveals its light at a certain time in the middle of the night. How about this? Let's wait here and wait for an opportunity. All right. The 4 thieves nodded and sat down in front of them. They then took out some wine and meat and began eating. During this period, most of the discussions were about the Guo family's past, the tragedy that happened back then, and some of the achievements of the 4 of them. Listening to their discussion, Lin Jin was able to confirm his suspicions. These 4 were undoubtedly villains. According to them, the Beastmaster 4th Scroll really does exist. and it's an extremely valuable cultivation technique. Lin Jin pondered, musing that this was a great opportunity. It would have been fine if he didn't come across it, but since he did, he might as well observe the situation. Who knows? He might even get something out of it. After confirming that the camouflage was working, Lin Jin regulated his breathing while he waited. Less than half an hour later, footsteps could be heard again. Not only did Lin Jin hear these footsteps, but the four villains did too. Someone's here. Be careful. We'll act according to the situation later. The four men's eyes were glowing, and they were on high alert. Just then, someone shouted from outside, "The four of you inside. You're early." The voice was coarse and menacing. Following the voice, two people pushed the door open and entered. One of them was tall, while the other was short. The one who spoke was the taller man, and behind him were two bears. One of the bears was tall, while the other was short. However, they both had thick skin and flesh. One of them had red eyes, while the other had a blue glint. One look, and anyone could tell that they weren't the friendly type. The Northridge duo. The expressions of the four villains in the yard changed. It was obvious that these two newcomers weren't to be trifled with. At the very least, they were more infamous than they were. You four devils of Mount Kuei have made quite a name for yourselves in the villainous world. But to be honest, if you insist on getting involved in this mess, it's still not enough. If you know what's good for you, leave. One of the Northridge duo let out an eerie laugh as he issued a warning. That might not be the case. The four people in the courtyard also had fierce expressions on their faces at that moment. The two of you are seniors of the corrupt path. Logically speaking, we should be very respectful towards you. After all, the mighty bustling duo is ranked in the top 50 of the corrupt path's ranking of elites, but the four of us aren't that bad either. Besides, we have to be particular about who comes first. Chapter 273. Ignorant. Big Xiong of the North Ridge duo's expression darkened. The shorter second hero beside him said, "Big brother, these four don't know what's good for them. Let's just ignore them. Whether they live or die, they asked for it." At this, Big Xiong nodded and said nothing more. The two men came in with their pet beasts too. After looking around, they couldn't see through Lin Jin's camouflage either. The two brothers sat on the other side, facing off against the four devils of Mount Kuei. Relatively speaking, the Northridge duo had fewer people, but their aura was stronger. The four devils had more people, but their aura was weaker. Things were getting interesting. Lin Jin opened his eyes slightly and glanced at the two newcomers before slowly closing them again. With Lin Jin's current beast appraising skills, he no longer had to rely entirely on the Museum of Deadly Beasts. He could basically identify the species and level of regular beasts just by looking at them. The Northridge duo's pet beasts were both rank 3. While they were slightly stronger than the four devils, it wasn't by much. Their difference was very limited. These people had arrived, but they didn't make a move. Instead, they just waited. This proved that they knew what was going on here. Combining this with what Lin Jin had heard earlier, he deduced that these people were here for the Beastmaster Fourth Scroll. In other words, the Beastmaster Fourth Scroll really did exist. However, Lin Jin had never heard of it. It wasn't that he was ignorant. Not many people knew about the Beastmaster Fourth Scroll. As for how these two groups found out about it, Lin Jin had no idea. Lin Jin pondered. Since these two groups knew about it, more people might show up later. Lin Jin's prediction came true. Soon, there was a commotion outside. But this time, it was a mess of footsteps as a group of people came in. "See, I wasn't wrong, was I? There's an abandoned house here. It's spacious, so we don't have to stay at a farmer's house for the night." A young voice rang out, followed by someone else. "Brother Lee is right. It's a rare opportunity for us to learn beast appraising from headquarters in the royal city. Everyone says that headquarters is the holy land for beast appraisers in the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom. We've been looking forward to it for a long time now, and we can't wait to get there as soon as possible. Brother Nien, no matter how urgent it is, it'll take at least a day. After we rest tonight, we should be there tomorrow night." This time, it was a woman who spoke. She sounded young and had a lively air about her. Following the voice, a group of 7 young men entered. However, The 7 of them did not expect that there would be people in this abandoned house in the wilderness. So, when they entered, they were immediately stunned. Of the 7 people, 5 were men and 2 were women. Their average age was no more than 20 years old. It was obvious that they had just entered Jianghu. The 2 groups of villains in the yard didn't look like good people, so the 7 youths hesitated to enter. The Northern Ridge duo and the 4 devils of Mount Kauai were also looking at the 7 youths. These evil path experts had sharp eyes, and they could tell with a glance that the 7 youths weren't like them, who had come for the Beast King for a scroll. There was an 80 to 90% chance that they were really just passing by and staying the night. After all, passers-by who didn't know what was going on might come in and stay the night after seeing this abandoned house. Since none of the 3 parties said a word, the 7 youths were the first to give in. So, there's already someone here. Then we shouldn't disturb them. Come, let's find another place to stay, one of the youths said with quick reflexes. Lin Jin was also sizing up the 7 youths. To his surprise, he met one of their eyes. With just one glance, Lin Jin was sure that the other party could see him. It was a young woman dressed in plain clothes. She looked average too, but her eyes were large and intelligent. Lin Jin had a good look at her. Upon entering the house, the first thing she saw was the coffin and white ape, then Lin Jin. But not the others. This woman was clearly no ordinary person. At the very least, she was talented enough to see through Lin Jin's camouflage. The woman didn't dare to say a word. After all, none of the people in this yard looked like normal people no matter how she looked at them. The only normal person in this place was even more abnormal. Without a doubt, this wasn't a place to stay for long. It was better to leave as soon as possible. The people in the courtyard didn't stop them. Even though 2 of the 4 devils of Mount Kauai were looking at the 2 women lustfully, tonight's matter was too important. They also knew that it wasn't the time to be harassing them, so it was better to avoid trouble. And so, the 7 youths retreated awkwardly. That's strange. Why are there so many people in this abandoned house? I know, right? I was scared to death just now. Those 2 groups of people don't look like good people at all. They look so fierce. Brother Li is right. We shouldn't go in if we can. Big Brother Nien, there are clearly 3 groups of people inside. Why did you say that there were 2 groups? Furthermore, the most frightening thing is not those 2 groups of people. Instead, it is the coffin in the distance. Earlier, I saw that there seemed to be something inside that coffin. His voice scared the other 6 young men to death. Sister Qingzhu, don't scare us. There were only 2 groups of people in the yard just now. How could there be 3 groups? And there's no coffin either. Another girl stepped forward and asked with a pale face. The girl named Qingzhu widened her eyes and shook her head. How could that be? I saw a huge coffin when I went in. There was a big white ape next to it. All right, there was also a beautiful red-furred fox and a clean-looking mister. The more she spoke, the more scared she became. The other 6 youths were pale as a sheet. Qingzhu, we really didn't see anything just now. Did you think we're seeing ghosts? Ghosts? The other 6 youths shuddered in fear. 3 of them had pet beasts with them. However, their pet beasts were only average. If they were in trouble, they probably wouldn't be of much use. We shouldn't stay here for long. Let's go. Regardless of whether Qingzhu was telling the truth or not, this place was indeed inauspicious. Hence, all 7 of them had the same thought in mind. Leave. But at that moment, a gust of wind suddenly blew, sending sand and pebbles flying in all directions. However, this gust of wind left just as quickly as it came. Soon, it vanished without a trace. But after the wind disappeared, a beautiful woman was walking in their direction. The 7 youths didn't see how this woman came out of nowhere. But in the middle of the night, this woman was dressed in revealing clothes and had a smile on her face. She looked horrifying no matter how they looked at her. The girl named Qingzhu, in particular, widened her eyes as if she had seen something terrifying. Her entire body trembled. When the beautiful woman saw the 7 of them, she became even more excited and quickened her pace. Among the 7, the young master with the surname, Li, raised his eyebrows and gulped. He immediately called out to his people, opened the door to the residence, and led them inside. Chapter 274. Out in the wilderness, there were many monsters, and if one was unlucky, they would run into one. Young Masterly had heard from his family that if one encountered any strange creatures, one must avoid them. At the very least, one must head to a crowded area. Right now, the place with the most people was the deserted house. Although the people in the house didn't look like good people, they were still people. But that thing outside might not be the case. 7 people rushed in with pale faces. The 2 groups of people in the 2 courtyards were stunned. Could it be that these 7 brats are really here for the Beastmaster 4th scroll? 2 of the 4 devils of Mount Kuei immediately stood up with fierce expressions. Seeing this, young Masterly quickly saluted them. Not daring to lie, he explained the situation outside. Good men, we are beast appraiser apprentices from Shuyang City. We're on our way to the Royal Capital's Beast Appraisal Association headquarters to study and happen to pass by. We didn't want to disturb your rest, but there seems to be something unclean outside, so we didn't dare to stay any longer. How about this? Once that thing leaves, we'll leave and we won't disturb your rest. Mr. Lee was obviously forced into a corner. That seductive woman outside was definitely not an ordinary person. He wasn't just randomly guessing. He had a jade pendant that was passed down from his ancestors. If he encountered any demonic or ghostly beings, the jade pendant would heat up. Just now, when he saw that woman, the jade pendant was so hot that it scalded his hand. Hence, there was no need to ask. That thing was definitely vicious. As for this courtyard, although Qingzhu mentioned something like a coffin or a great white ape, young Masterly really didn't see anything. Moreover, his jade pendant didn't heat up in this courtyard, which meant that it wasn't a big problem. Something unclean? At this, the 4 devils of Mount Kuei couldn't help but burst into laughter. They were obviously mocking the 7 for being cowards. Even the North Ridge duo looked incredulous. Villainous experts like them were numb to killing. Even if they encountered evil spirits, they wouldn't be afraid. Lin Jin, on the other hand, seemed to have sensed something as he looked up at the door. At the same time, there was a knock on the door. In an instant, the 4 devils of Mount Kuei and the North Ridge duo froze. There really was someone here? They obviously didn't believe the words of the 7 passers-by, but now that they really heard the knock on the door, they were a little surprised. It's really lively tonight. 4th, go open the door and see what's outside, the leader of the 4 devils of Mount Kuei said. The 4th of the 4 evils nodded and walked over with his pet beast. When they heard the knocking earlier, Mr. Lee and the others were already cowering in fear. Asking them to open the door probably wouldn't work. The door opened, and because of the angle, they could only see OL for standing at the door, letting out a weird laugh. Where did this little girl come from? She's so pretty. This was a teasing remark. But in the next moment, the situation changed. Old 4 felt as if he was being dragged away by a huge force. At the same time, his pet beast, a jackal, pounced forward. Sounds of fighting could be heard in the darkness outside, but it only lasted for a few breaths before it abruptly stopped. After that, there was a strange silence. F***, something happened to 4th bro. 3 of the 4 devils of Mount Kuei reacted immediately. They couldn't be blamed for their slow reflexes. Everything just happened too fast and too sudden, so sudden that they couldn't react in time. Young Master Lee and the others were so frightened that they retreated to the house, their faces filled with terror. What happened just now? Did anyone see anything? No, I just saw that person being dragged away. It must be that woman. She's definitely a monster. It's over. It's over. Don't panic, don't panic. We have more people here. That monster might not dare to come in. As they spoke, the 4 devils of Mount Kuei had already drawn their weapons and charged out with their pet beasts. They were so fast that they could only hear the howling winds and the sounds of fighting. This made the 7 passers-by even more frightened. The North Ridge duo looked at each other. I'm afraid there's really a demon lurking in the outer sect. Old 2, since we're here today, we'll have to face it sooner or later. Let's go out and take a look. Big brother, I've been thinking about this. While it doesn't matter if the 4 devils of Mount Kuei are dead or alive, humans are still more reliable when it comes to demons. If they're dead, the 2 of us can't do anything alone. These two had a clear view of the situation. In the next instant, the Northridge duo left with their rank 3 bear beasts. The sounds of fighting outside grew louder. At times, the ground would rumble. Other than the howls of wolves and bears, one could occasionally hear the thunderous roar of a tiger. Lin Jin had been watching the entire process. He couldn't see clearly, but he was sure that there was a monster outside, a monster that had turned into a demon. In other words, a demon. Demons weren't commonly seen, and Lin Jin wasn't mistaken. Using his spiritual eye, he could see a monstrous aura and tumbling demonic energy outside. Lin Jin wasn't afraid of ferocious beasts. He had fought many monsters before, but this was his first time encountering a demon. Although Lin Jin was confident in his abilities, it was better to be cautious since this was his first time encountering something like this. Moreover, be it the Northridge duo or the 4 devils of Mount Kauai, they were all murderous villains. Lin Jin couldn't care less if they died, but if the demon charged in, it would be a different story. In short, Lin Jin was hesitant while Xiaohu was calm. White Ape, on the other hand, couldn't sit still, scratching his ears and cheeks as he watched the monstrous aura outside. Zombie Cthulhu in the coffin reached out with his tentacles to look around. Among young Master Li's group of 7, the girl named Qingzhu was terrified, but most of her attention was on Lin Jin. Lin Jin noticed her staring at him. After a moment's thought, he beckoned her over. Qingzhu was stunned, clearly hesitant. She didn't know how she managed to convince herself, but she slowly walked over. Seeing this, her companions questioned her. Qingzhu shook her head in silence. When she got closer to Lin Jin, she bowed and asked, "Sir, you call for me?" As she spoke, Qingzhu noticed Lin Jin's 2-ring sleeve band, and her face lit up with joy. She quickly asked, "Sir, are you a rank 2 beast appraiser?" Lin Jin nodded. "I noticed that you could see me, so I called you here to ask if this is a sign of your innate talent." Now that he was observing her up close, Lin Jin could tell that this girl was indeed talented. Her eyes were huge, and there was a tinge of redness in her pupils. It was obvious that she had extraordinary eyesight and possessed spiritual energy. She was equivalent to a natural-born spirit eye. In the past, Lin Jin wouldn't have understood. But now, he knew that people born with a spiritual eye had immense potential and qualifications. No matter what they did, it would be much easier than the average person, especially when it came to cultivation. "Your beast appraiser's apprentices?" Lin Jin noticed the patterns on her sleeves. Qingzhu nodded. "Great, great." Lin Jin called her over just to ask her about it. Now that he had confirmed it, there was nothing else to ask. However, to him, it was fate that brought them together. These 7 must have stumbled into this place by mistake. Since they were innocent, Lin Jin would do his best to protect them. Chapter 275. You'll stay here later. Warn your 6 companions not to wander off. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect you if anything happens, Lin Jin instructed. Although Qingzhu did not know the name of the handsome young man in front of him, there was something convincing about what he said, and so she nodded. Qingzhu didn't ask anything else. She could clearly see that the thing that looked like a fire fox next to this gentleman, as well as the white ape and even the coffin, all belonged to this gentleman. Yet, she didn't know that her earlier actions were extremely strange to Mr. Li and the others. Due to camouflage, they couldn't even hear Lin Jin's words. All they saw was Qingzhu talking to the air. One could only imagine how frightening this scene was on such a strange night. "Say, do you guys think Qingzhu is possessed?" One of them couldn't help but voice his thoughts. No one said a word. Mr. Li then whispered, "Strange things are happening all over the place tonight. Anyway, be careful. If anything goes wrong, we'll split up and run. Remember, as many as we can escape, will survive." Just then, there was a commotion outside. Then, several people ran back in a flustered manner. Mr. Li and the others took a few steps back in fright. They were the 2 groups of villains from earlier. However, the number of people wasn't right. Although the 2 men with the bears had returned, one of them looked pale while the other was covered in blood. His arms were limp, clearly suffering from severe injuries. Only 2 of the 4 devils of Mount Kuei had returned. They were only lightly injured, but it was obvious that they were terrified. As for their pet beasts, neither of the North Ridge duo's bears had returned. Only one of the 4 devils of Mount Kuei's pet beasts managed to escape. However, this tiger beast had lost all of its might. It was only a rank 2 tiger beast, so no one knew what could have scared it to this extent. The 4 men who returned also looked terrified, a stark contrast from their earlier ferocious demeanor. Right now, they were even weaker than Mr. Lee and the others. At that moment, the North Ridge Mighty Duo and the remaining 2 villains could no longer care about anything else. They looked outside the courtyard with faces full of fear. Who would have thought that we, the North Ridge Duo, would fall here today? That fiendish demon is so strong. I'm afraid none of us here will survive today. The chilly wind outside had also disappeared without a trace. In the desolate house, the tense atmosphere became more and more intense. Finally, under everyone's gazes, a woman walked in. However, some people noticed that under the moonlight, this woman's shadow was like a ferocious tiger. The woman was dressed in bright red clothes and was incomparably beautiful. She was barefooted, but there was no dirt on her as she walked in. But it was this woman who caused those corrupt experts to retreat in fear. One of them didn't pay attention to his feet and tripped over a rock, falling to the ground. Cried Mr. Lee. He removed the jade pendant from his chest, which glowed with a red light. "It's scalding me. It's scalding me," Mr. Lee said. At this moment, he grabbed the rope and stared at the woman. He said loudly, "She's a demon. She's here to eat people. Everyone, run for your lives." This was the plan they had discussed earlier. And so they did. They planned to scatter and flee. Some even wanted to climb over the walls. However, the woman in red chuckled. With a sweep of her sleeve, a strong gust of wind swept them back. They were dumbfounded. If they couldn't escape, wouldn't death be their only option? Suddenly, the woman in red noticed Lin Jin in the yard. She was dumbstruck. Up until now, Lin Jin's camouflage was still in effect. Mortals wouldn't be able to see him, Xiaohua, White Ape, and the others. Even the coffin was concealed by the silver needles, imbued with spiritual energy. However, the woman in red could see everything clearly. She first looked at White Ape and the coffin before shifting her gaze to Xiaohua. Her eyes glowed as she mumbled to herself, "Dharma body. It's a Dharma body." Then, he turned to Lin Jin, only to see Lin Jin sitting there. His clothes were clean and tidy, and he had a calm demeanor. There was a cloud of mist lingering around him, rolling and changing as he breathed. It was a mystical sight. Although this person seemed ordinary, the woman in red could vaguely sense an aura of authority from him. Although it was well hidden, with her high cultivation level, she could still sense it. If she tried to probe further, she would feel shaken and immediately retracted her aura. The woman in red was a tiger demon with a high cultivation level. She had gained human form 100 years ago and even cultivated demonic energy, allowing her to roam the world. This time, she had something to do, which was why she had come from a faraway province. However, when she saw that the place she was going to, there were already people there. Furthermore, those people spoke rudely to her, which was why she was so displeased. Thus, she killed a few people who didn't have eyes. At her current cultivation level, she no longer needed to consume flesh to refine her blood essence and condense her demonic energy. But if she was in a bad mood, eating humans was a piece of cake for her. However, she didn't expect there to be an expert in this mansion. This was something she didn't expect. Putting that smokescreen aside, the little wolf beast's Dharma body alone was enough to stun her. She had long reached a bottleneck in her current illusory realm where spirit energy was thin. An expert once advised her that if she wanted to improve further, she had to cultivate a Dharma body. This was her only path. However, the expert who advised her didn't know how to condense a Dharma body himself. Hence, she had been traveling the world in search of opportunities all these years. Unfortunately, she didn't make any progress. In the first few decades, she still had a glimmer of hope. But as time went by, that hope slowly faded, and she was completely disappointed. Hence, when she saw a pet beast with a Dharma body, she was stunned. As she had studied Dharma bodies before, the tiger demon could tell that the fire wolf had a Dharma body. There was no doubt about it. Did the fire wolf cultivate a Dharma body on its own? Impossible. The fire wolf's rank was so low, and it wasn't a monster either. It was a pet beast that had formed a blood contract with someone. It couldn't have cultivated a Dharma body on its own. If that was the case, then its owner must be skilled. The tiger demon turned to Lin Jin again. The people in the yard had thought that they would die for sure. Next, they would most likely be devoured by this terrifying demon. They were all terrified and in despair. But what surprised them was that when this demon came in, other than the wind that swept back a few people in a panic, actually stood at the door as if it was in a daze. No one dared to speak. Silence reigned. The villains had witnessed this demon's terror before. They knew that their lives were in the hands of this demon, so they didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. However, there was no one in the demon's line of sight. Yet, she seemed to be able to see something. It was unbelievable. Chapter 276. Truth be told, Lin Jin was very hesitant. He had only planned to stay here for the night, to get some rest and cultivate. Who knew he would run into trouble here? Not only that, it was so troublesome that it even involved a demon. This was Lin Jin's first time meeting this demon. It was much stronger than the old dragon. The old dragon was a rank 5 dragon beast, but due to his injuries and lack of strength, he could barely be considered a rank 5. However, this monster before him was a solid rank 5. Moreover, it was at the pinnacle of rank 5 monsters. In terms of strength, even if it couldn't beat the old dragon, it was definitely much stronger than him. It was best not to provoke a demon of this level if possible. But then again, Lin Jin was no longer the same as before. If they were to fight, he wasn't afraid. Xiao Hua's yin-yang dharma body wasn't something he cultivated for nothing. Now, Lin Jin was holding a needle between his fingers. If the other party wanted to fight, Lin Jin wouldn't hold back. It all depended on the monster's decision now. A few breaths felt like years to everyone here. Lin Jin remained as still as a mountain. He neither spoke nor made a move. Now, all the pressure was on the female demon. In addition, she was shaken to see Xiao Hua's dharma body. Already feeling inferior, she couldn't hold it in anymore. After a moment's thought, she took 2 steps forward and curtsied. "Greetings, Mr. I'm Hu Yuzhen from Mount Songliang." It was a respectful greeting. At this moment, the woman in red no longer resembled a demon. Be it her expression or voice, she was no different from a decent girl. In fact, she seemed like a well-educated and well-mannered girl. Everyone in the yard felt their hearts pounding. Other than Qingzhu, no one knew what this demon was doing or who she was bowing to. At least no one would be shameless enough to assume that they were the Mr. this female demon was referring to. Just as everyone was confused and at a loss for what to do, Lin Jin deactivated his camouflage. In an instant, everyone in the yard saw a man and several beasts appear out of thin air. What was even more ridiculous was that there was a coffin. Mr. Li and the others immediately recalled Qingzhu's words. Evidently, what Qingzhu said was true. There really was someone here. But how could this person disappear and reappear out of thin air? Was this person good or bad? Was it a man or a ghost? Mr. Li and the others had mixed feelings in their hearts. They couldn't describe what they were feeling, but they all hoped that this person was a good person. That way, they might be able to keep their lives today. On the other side, the Northridge duo and the remaining 2 villains had similar thoughts. They were knowledgeable and knew that the young man was probably not a demon. As long as he was not a demon, it was fine. To Lin Jin, since the demoness had spoken up, he couldn't play dumb anymore. Moreover, she was well-mannered, so she must be wary of him. If that was the case, they might not even need to do anything. Lin Jin got up and saluted them. Lin Jin was just passing by. "Sorry for disturbing you." At this time, Mr. Li reacted quickly. He recalled Qingzhu's words and knew that his life would be tied to this expert in front of him today. He immediately took a few steps forward and knelt on the ground. "We are all from the 4 cities of Xuyang. This time we were on our way to King's City to study, and we also happened to pass by here. In the end, we encountered a demon. Please save us, sir. Please save us. Mr. Lee was no fool. After confirming that this expert was a living person, he knew that if they wanted to live, it would depend on whether the man would help them or not. As for whether he could be saved, that was an easy question to answer. That fiendish demon was indeed terrifying. The group of villains had lost 2 people in just a few exchanges, and the rest were all injured. Their pet beasts were almost all dead, while the female fiendish demon remained unscathed. From this alone, one could tell that the female fiendish demon was a terrifying existence. However, such a terrifying demoness was immediately stunned the moment she entered the yard. Everyone had clearly seen her dazed expression just now. Then, as if her personality had changed, the initially arrogant and demonic demoness became courteous like a respectable woman as she bowed to the young man. If it wasn't for the fact that she couldn't afford to offend him, why would she do this? Mr. Lee's family was considered a prominent one in the 4 cities of Shuyang. Having seen the world since he was young, he immediately made a decision. That expert was clearly hesitant. He didn't want to get involved in this matter. If he really left, all of them would die in that demoness' hands. Qing Zhu and the others knelt down as well. Lin Jin had never seen something like this before. However, he had planned to protect these passers-by, especially after learning that they were apprentices of the Beast Appraisal Association. He had a good impression of them. Qing Zhu was a talented person with innate spiritual eyes. With just a little guidance, she would achieve great things in the future. It would be a pity if she died here. At this, Lin Jin saluted the demoness and said, "It's fate that we met. You've already devoured 2 people tonight, but they are also villains who have committed many evil deeds, so I won't interfere. I just hope that Misu will stop while you're ahead and not kill again. It won't help your cultivation at all." This exhortation was very polite, but it also carried a deterrent force. Lin Jin wasn't someone to be trifled with. Back in the royal capital, he had slaughtered the Jade Dragon Kingdom's guardian dragon beast, so he had developed a murderous aura. If this demoness wouldn't listen, Lin Jin would have no choice but to take action. The demoness pondered for a moment before nodding. "You're right, sir. Since we met, it's fate. How can I not listen to you, sir?" Having said that, she turned to the villains and Mr. Lee and said, "The few of you can leave now. Remember, you better not tell anyone about what happened tonight. Don't think that this tiny Jade Dragon Kingdom can protect you. If I want to kill you, even if you hide in that old emperor's palace, you'll still die." Fiendish demons were fiendish demons. Being courteous was just an act. Being vicious was their true nature. This threat scared the villains so much that they broke out in cold sweat and nodded vigorously. Lin Jin stopped Qing Zhu. After some thought, he said, "You're quite talented and you have innate spiritual eyes. You're most suited to be a beast appraiser, but you'll need a good teacher to guide you. Remember, when you get to the royal capital, look for Appraiser Tan Sun. Tell him that Lin Jin asked you to look for him. Appraiser Tan Sun will know what to do." Appraiser Tan Sun? Qing Zhu and her companions were all shocked. In the Jade Dragon Kingdom, Appraiser Tan Sun's name was well known within the beast appraiser community. After all, he was one of the few rank 3 beast appraisers in the kingdom. All apprentices had heard of him from the day they entered the profession. It could be said that Tan Sun, who was a rank 3 beast appraiser, was a very prestigious existence in the eyes of these apprentices. To think that this man knew Appraiser Tan Sun and even helped Qing Zhu build a relationship. This was an opportunity that one couldn't even dream of. Mr. Lee and the other 6 stared at Qing Zhu enviously. Chapter 277. Thank you, Mr. Lin. Thank you, Mr. Lin. Qing Zhu hurriedly expressed her gratitude. Lin Jin smiled and waved. "All right, you may leave now." Qing Zhu bowed before leaving with her companions. Once they were out of the yard, the 7 of them subconsciously hastened their footsteps. They were no longer tired. Even if they had to travel through the night, they had to leave this place as soon as possible. Meanwhile, The Northridge duo and the remaining two villains thanked Lin Jean profusely as well. Lin Jean didn't have a good impression of these villains, but they were still lives. After this experience, all four of them were injured and their pet beasts were all lost. Lin Jean believed that they would learn something and change their minds. Of course, if they didn't repent and continued to commit evil, they would eventually meet their end. Lin Jean had officially embarked on the path of cultivation. After condensing the yin-yang dharma body for Xiaohua, his understanding of cultivation had improved significantly. Although his supernatural powers didn't seem to have improved, his mental state had improved. Once everyone had left, only Lin Jin's party and the female demon were left in the yard. Mr. Lin, ever since I achieved success in my cultivation 100 years ago, I've stopped killing the innocent. Even if I were to take action this time, I would only kill villains with malevolent auras. I wouldn't lay my hands on ordinary mortals. I hope Mr. Lin can understand this, Hu Yuzhen suddenly said. The demoness, Hu Yuzhen, suddenly spoke up. She seemed to be defending herself, but at the same time, it seemed like she was trying to build a good impression for Lin Jean. Lin Jean was puzzled. Logically speaking, with this female demon's cultivation and skills, there was no need for her to be so courteous or even respectful to him. She might not have given him face out of pure will. Lin Jean was afraid that she would suddenly make things difficult for him, but to his surprise, she remained so humble. Lin Jean figured that since they didn't know each other before, she must have a favor to ask of him. Sure enough, the female demon said, Mr. Lin, your skills are impressive to be able to condense a dharma body for your pet beast. I've long encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation, and it's been hard for me to break through. Years ago, I received guidance from an expert who said that the next step is to condense a dharma body. However, I've been searching for years without success. It's my fortune to be able to meet you today. I hope that you can understand how difficult it is for monsters like us to cultivate and enlighten me. Having said that, she bowed again. So that was how it was. Lin Jean finally understood why the demoness had reacted in such a manner upon entering. It was because she had seen Xiao Hua's dharma body. Honestly, if he was in her shoes, if he was stuck at a bottleneck after cultivating for a long time and suddenly found an opportunity to break through, he would be just as respectful. Knowing this, Lin Jean felt relieved. What he was afraid of was the kind of person who fawned over him for no reason, and he had to be on guard all times. Now that he knew the reason, he didn't have to worry too much. After all, he already knew what the other party wanted. Speaking of dharma body condensation, Lin Jean had experienced it once, so he knew a thing or two about it. However, ancient methods weren't easily passed down. Moreover, this was a demon he had just met. It was much more difficult to form a fiendish demon than ordinary monsters. The other party had probably cultivated for much longer than the old dragon. Furthermore, he must have received guidance from some expert. Otherwise, he would not have been able to cultivate to this level. He still had to be on guard against what he should be on guard against. However, he couldn't say it out loud. After all, he couldn't crush this demon just yet. Lin Jean could tell that this was a tigress that had turned into a demon. Angering her wouldn't be a good thing. It was better not to break the balance. Since you want my guidance, may I take your pulse and check your acupoints? Lin Jean asked with a smile, pointing at the two-ringed beast tattoo on his arm. This meant that he was a beast appraiser. Hu Yuzhen came to her senses. Without hesitation, she extended her arm to Lin Jean. This tigress's transfiguration skill was impressive. Even Lin Jean wouldn't be able to tell if he didn't look closely. Her arm was smooth and slender, fairer and more delicate than most women's. Just by looking at Hu Yuzhen's playful face, Lin Jean knew she was doing this on purpose. Lin Jean smiled. As a beast appraiser, he didn't even care about Shang'er's outstanding beauty. The tigress, Hu Yuzhen, was obviously inferior, so how could he be tempted by her? Using his finger to check her pulse, Lin Jean immediately entered her information into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. It really is a peak rank 5 demon, Lin Jean thought. Lin Jean mused. This was the first time the Museum of Deadly Beasts recorded a demon. The museum seemed to have expanded in size compared to before. Upon closer inspection, There was a new consultation hall named Demon Slaying Hall. However, there was nothing in this new hall. It was empty, and Lin Jin couldn't figure out what was going on, so he could only ignore it for now. He then looked at the demon's information. Peak rank 5 Tiger Demon. Demonized due to obsession. 491 years old. Desolate Tiger. Devoured jade to nurture spirits. Controlled black winds to devour living beings. Cultivated blood jade. Demon formula. Wind manipulation. Proficient in haunting. Demonized due to obsession. Path of evolution has been sealed. Aside from cultivating a Dharma body, there is no other possibility of evolution. Demon slaying method is, there was a lot of information about this demon in the museum. Lin Jin read carefully, and after reading about demonization and demon slaying method, Lin Jin came to a realization. It was no wonder the Museum of Deadly Beast had a demon slaying hall. So it was for this purpose. Lin Jin had an idea. Looking at the demon slaying method was troublesome too. However, there must be benefits after slaying the demon, so Lin Jin wanted to give it a try. Initially, he had no intention of guiding the demon slaying method, but now he changed his mind. Mr. Lin, have you found anything? Hu Yuzhen couldn't resist asking after Lin Jin remained silent for so long. Come to think of it, she had been keeping her guard up. This beast appraiser was only a rank 2 beast appraiser, but he could manifest a Dharma body. This meant that he might not be a true rank 2 beast appraiser. A typical rank 2 beast appraiser would never manifest a Dharma body, let alone bring along so many beasts and monsters. Hu Yuzhen could see through White Ape's background at a glance. In her eyes, White Ape was at most a small demon. However, even small demons were rare in this world, not to mention one that followed the human race. Also, the one in the coffin was not simple either. However, the one that she was most afraid of was the firewolf beast that had a Dharmakaya. That was the thing she had always dreamed of. Looking at Xiaohua, Hu Yuzhen's eyes darkened. There was fear, jealousy, and a strong sense of yearning. Lin Jin could see the look in her eyes clearly. This was a demon. Before this, Lin Jin had no idea what a demon was. Forget him. Even if he were to ask the world's most talented people, how many of them would be able to answer the question? However, Lin Jin was the owner of the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Although he didn't know about demons before, he now had a deep understanding of them. To put it simply, demons were obsessions. Most obsessions in this world, regardless of whether they were good or evil at first, would eventually lead to evil. Be it humans or monsters, as long as they had obsessions, they could turn into demons. Hu Yuzhen was originally a monster. After achieving some success in her cultivation, she hit a bottleneck and began pursuing the path of the Dharma body. However, she couldn't find the right method, so she turned into a demon due to her obsession. That was the gist of it. Chapter 278. Since ancient times, various books and legends had described demons as terrifying and powerful, but that wasn't the case. If a mortal's obsession was too strong, they could also become a demon. But to say how powerful it was, it depended on the person's own strength. If it was a mortal, then it was a mortal demon. Similarly, Hu Yuzhen's demon was her original strength, the peak of the 5th step. However, according to the museum, demons weren't as simple as they seemed. If their obsession was too strong, they would be unable to extricate themselves from it and would often do crazy and terrifying things. To slay a demon was to sever their obsession. With a plan in mind, Lin Jin asked, "Miss Hu, in your opinion, what is a Dharma body?" Lin Jin began to guide her. Hu Yuzhen had obviously studied this question before. Without a second thought, she blurted out, "A Dharma body is obviously a body made of mana. One would shed their mortal body and change their spirit bones. Supernatural powers would be formed naturally, mana would be endless, and the physical body would be indestructible." The tigress's explanation was clear and logical. Lin Jin could tell that she had been trying her best to find a Dharma body all these years, but to no avail. She was not to be blamed for not trying hard enough, and it was not that she was unlucky either. It was just that not everyone and not every demon could succeed in attaining Dharmakaya. In other words, a Dharma body was only one possibility on the path of cultivation. It wasn't the only possibility. Lin Jean had no idea who told her that a Dharma body was her only chance to break through her bottleneck. But Lin Jean was sure that wasn't the case. Whether it was intentional or not, the person who said that had pointed her to the wrong path was equivalent to harming Hu Yuzhen. To use an idiom to describe it, it was misleading the students. Even with the Museum of Deadly Beasts, Lin Jean couldn't help Hu Yuzhen condense a Dharma body now. A Dharma body was something that could only be chanced upon. If one came across it, they would. If not, waiting for thousands of years would be useless. Hu Yuzhen clearly belonged to this category. To put it bluntly, it was impossible for Hu Yuzhen to cultivate a Dharma body. She wasn't cut out for it. At least, the Museum of Deadly Beasts didn't mention anything about it. As for whether Xiao Hua could condense a Dharma body, Lin Jean didn't think it was possible. If it was possible, the museum would surely explain it. However, he couldn't tell her that directly. Breaking someone's hope was like cutting off their path. Although she had become a demon now, she could still be saved if her obsession was broken. If he really told her the truth, this tigress would definitely fall into madness immediately. At that time, the demon seed would be so deep that it would drown her intelligence, and she would really become an evil demon that only knew how to kill. At that time, what he would have to sever would not be her obsession, but her physical body and soul. At this, Lin Jean decided to stall for time and see if he could slowly resolve the problem. Of course, he could just ignore it, but since the demon-slaying hall had appeared in the museum, it was meant for him to sever Hu Yuzhen's obsession and turn her into a demon. If he didn't seize this opportunity, he might miss out on a great opportunity. Xiaohua, come here. Lin Jean waved at Xiaohua, and the latter hopped over nimbly. His body was enveloped in a halo of light. Under the night sky, Lin Jean could see a trace of him, but when he looked again, it seemed to have disappeared. This was the wonder of a Dharmakaya. At the sight of Xiaohua, Hu Yuzhen's eyes lit up. Lin Jean said, "My pet beast is condensed at Yin-Yang Dharmakaya." Yin-Yang Dharmakaya? Hu Yuzhen was so excited that her breathing quickened. She pricked up her ears, knowing that this expert was going to give her some pointers. That's right. The Yin-Yang Dharmakaya is a combination of extreme yin and pure yang. Using mana to achieve a balance, the Dharmakaya is formed. However, while the Dharmakaya is amazing, condensing it isn't easy. If you want to condense a Dharmakaya, you won't be able to do it in a short period of time. Lin Jean was telling her not to rush and to take her time. Hu Yuzhen stared at Xiao Hua's Dharmakaya in envy. At Lin Jin's words, she quickly nodded. "I know what you're saying, sir. I've been traveling all over the world for years, but to no avail. I know that condensing a Dharmakaya isn't suitable, but I believe that with your guidance, sir, I will have hope of condensing a Dharmakaya." Having said that, she was about to kowtow to Lin Jean. Lin Jean quickly stopped her. "If sir can teach me how to condense a Dharmakaya, you will be my second parent. When I condense a Dharmakaya, I will obey your every command without fail." Hu Yuzhen insisted on bowing. Lin Jean didn't stop her this time. Although he didn't give this tigress the method to condense a Dharmakaya, if he succeeded in slaying her demon, he would have saved her. Slaying her demon and breaking her obsession would make it easier for this tigress to evolve. Hence, it wasn't a big deal for Lin Jean to accept her bow first. At this time, it was already past the third watch period. Suddenly, Lin Jean sensed something. Looking up, he saw a bright moon hanging overhead. The gentle night breeze had stopped, and in the next instant, the atmosphere around them changed. An invisible aura rippled out of the mansion, and white fog rose from the ground. Lin Jean could clearly see a vortex in the center of the fog, as if it was connected to another place. Just like when the visitation hall opened, a door appeared out of nowhere, and the world inside was transformed. This phenomenon was difficult for most people to notice, not even White Ape Zombie Cthulhu. Only Xiao was stared at the white fog vortex and growled. Chapter 279. Hu Yuzhen was a demonic tiger demon, so she wasn't a pushover. A dark glint flashed across her eyes as she refused to back down. You brute. You haven't even mastered transfiguration. If you weren't guarding this door, I wouldn't have given you face if I wanted to go in and check out your Dharma skills. Now that I've met an expert, there's no need for me to beg you. Since you want to teach me a lesson, I'll teach you a lesson instead. Having said that, the two monsters began to fight. At the same time, the white mist beneath the lion demon's feet surged out and enveloped the entire courtyard. Strangely enough, the battle between the two demons under the white mist did not damage the deserted house at all. It was truly miraculous, especially since White Ape and Zombie Cthulhu were still unaware of it. This white mist clearly had the ability to divide worlds. Despite being in this small yard, through this white mist, there were actually 2 layers of space. How brilliant! Lin Jin's interest was piqued. He didn't stop them. Instead, with a sweep of his silver needle, he directed the mist toward White Ape and Zombie Cthulhu. White Ape and Zombie Cthulhu jumped into the world. One sat up in shock while the other howled. The coffin shook incessantly. White Ape, carry the coffin. Lin Jin ordered. White Ape immediately replied, Yes, sir. Having said that, he went over to carry the coffin. By now, the white mist had thickened. Hu Yuzhen, who was fighting against the lion, seemed to have the upper hand. This was very normal. Just as Hu Yuzhen had said, she was much stronger than the lion demon in terms of shape-shifting. In terms of ability, she was also stronger. To Lin Jin, Hu Yuzhen was at the peak of rank 5 while the lion was only a rank 4 monster. If they were to really fight, the lion wouldn't be able to survive. After suffering a few slaps, the lion demon was infuriated. He cried out and finally, for some reason, he shouted, You arrogant tiger demon, I will drag all of you into the painting world. Let's see how you cry then. The next instant, white mist rose from beneath his feet, and it was hard to see anything within a foot of him. Lin Jin took out his needle, just in case. However, nothing dangerous happened after that. Other than the white mist blotting out the sun, there were no signs of the enemy's reinforcements coming after him. However, as the white fog gradually dissipated, Lin Jin was startled to find his surroundings changing. Their surroundings were still covered in clouds and mist, and there was a towering gate in front of them. It was 30 meters tall and looked majestic. Turning around, Lin Jin saw that Hu Yuzhen was still locked in a fight with the lion monster. White Ape and Zombie Cthulhu had also entered while Xiaohu perched on Lin Jin's shoulder, looking wary. What is this place? Lin Jin was stunned. His first thought was that this was similar to the Nebula Barrier. Although General Lion was infuriated by Hu Yuzhen's attack earlier, he couldn't be blamed for being rude. Although he was initially annoyed, after seeing Lin Jin's behavior, he couldn't hold back his anger. Noticing Lin Jin's extraordinary bearing, General Lion gave it some thought and decided not to throw a tantrum. Still, he wasn't in a good mood either. You and this tiger demon are birds of a feather flock together. But since you've asked, I'll tell you. That's right. This is the painting world, created by an ancient immortal. I am the gatekeeper appointed by the immortal. If you dare to behave atrociously here, you will be cut down by the immortal's blade, energy, and die without a complete corpse. The lion demon looked smug as if he had a powerful backer. At this, Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat. Although he was shocked, he was mostly happy. Since the immortal path had fallen, there shouldn't be any immortals left in this world. To think that he would hear traces of an immortal here. More importantly, this place was so mysterious, and there was even that lightning blade energy earlier. No matter how he looked at it, it was undoubtedly the work of an immortal. With this, wouldn't he be able to see the true face of an immortal? As a reincarnated human, Lin Jin naturally hoped to learn some real skills. If there was an immortal here, it would be great if he could learn from them. Of course, He had to explain himself lest the immortal cut him down with the blade energy. Lin Jin smiled and said, "The conflict earlier was just a misunderstanding. This miss who wasn't really here to cause trouble. As for me, I'm willing to apologize to General Lion on her behalf. Alternatively, Lin Jin could apologize to the immortal in person." In Lin Jin's mind, an immortal must have a profound cultivation level and a transcendent state of mind. If Lin Jin apologized sincerely, the immortal wouldn't blame him. Moreover, Lin Jin could only admit defeat now. Apologizing was the only way out. Of course, if the immortal here wanted to vanquish the demon and kill Hu Yuzhen, Lin Jin wouldn't be able to stop him. At most, he would just leave the demon to the immortal and leave it to him. It was also for this reason that Lin Jin was acting so nonchalant. Lin Jin had considered the worst-case scenario, and that was to hide in the visitation hall. He believed that with the Museum of Deadly Beasts, even a true immortal wouldn't be able to detect him. Chapter 280. After Lin Jin apologized, General Lion didn't know how to respond. This man was clearly amenable to persuasion, but not coercion. Moreover, General Lion had no way of summoning the ancient immortal. Ever since he started guarding this door, he had never seen the ancient immortal who created this place. Even before this, General Lion had only heard the immortal's voice, but had never seen him in person. The previously arrogant Hu Yuzhen wasn't afraid of General Lion, but the sword energy that descended from the sky terrified her. She didn't dare to make a sound and remained as docile as a cat. General Lion had seen everything clearly. Lin Jin's pet beast stirred up a cold gust of wind and created a dome of ice out of thin air. Although it didn't manage to block the ancient immortal's sword energy, it did at least delay it for a moment. From this, General Lion could tell that this man wasn't as simple as he seemed. Since General Lion had apologized, shouldn't General Lion go with the flow and not pursue the matter of the tigress' wrongdoings? I can see that this Mr. Lin has an extraordinary bearing, and it just so happens that I have to bring in some mortals here every year to comprehend the ancient immortal arts. Since Mr. Lin has come this year, I won't be derelict in my duties. Mr. Lin, you can enter and have a look around. Also, Tigress, didn't you want to come in a long time ago? This time, I'll give Mr. Lin face and allow you to come along. But if you dare to behave atrociously again, the next time the immortal's sword chi comes, I will slay you. At this, Lin Jin knew that the matter had been resolved. He immediately went over to thank General Lion. General Lion was obviously a prideful person, so Lin Jin just had to give him face. Moreover, Lin Jin didn't sense any malevolent aura from General Lion. This proved that this lion monster had indeed been enlightened and restrained by someone. According to ancient records, he was an immortal beast reared by an immortal. That was what it meant. Now, that General Lion was willing to let Lin Jin in, that was for the best. As for the tiger demon, Hu Yuzhen, she kept quiet as she followed Lin Jin inside with her head lowered. Of course, there was still a hint of excitement on her face. Once they were some distance away from General Lion, she whispered, "Mr. Lin, I've long heard that there's an incredible immortals cave here. But I've been here a few times, but this lion wouldn't let me in. If it weren't for you, Mr. Lin, I wouldn't have been able to enter, and I would have been killed by the immortal. I'll never forget how you've saved my life." After saying that, he bowed with sincerity. "It's good that you know." Lin Jin nodded before asking, "How much do you know about this place?" Hu Yuzhen immediately said, "I heard that there was a family here who obtained the fourth scroll of the Beastmaster, but in the end, they met with misfortune and died." Their brows were furrowed, as if they were deep in thought. Even when Lin Jin's group arrived, the people on the square didn't seem to care. Lin Jin was curious, but there was someone else who was even more curious. Hu Yuzhen couldn't help but step forward to ask. The person being questioned was a middle-aged man. His clothes were tattered and his hair was disheveled. Who knew how long it had been since he took care of himself? He was clearly reluctant to be stopped by Hu Yuzhen. "What are we doing?" "We're studying the Beastmaster 4 scroll, of course." If you want to study it, go ahead and take a look at the stone tablet ahead. Don't disturb me." Having said that, he lowered his head in deep thought. Hu Yujin's eyes darkened. If it weren't for Lin Jin, she might have swallowed this insolent fool whole. But with Lin Jin around, she didn't have the courage to do so. "Let's go over and take a look." Lin Jin noticed a stone tablet erected in front of the hall. As he got closer, Lin Jin's brows twitched. This stone tablet had all the contents of the Beastmaster Scroll 1 to 3. The Beastmaster Scroll was a blood contract cultivation technique that was difficult to obtain in the outside world. Who knew it would be so casually engraved on a stone tablet here? Not only that, but after the Beastmaster 3rd Scroll, the words Beastmaster 4th Scroll were written. However, the words after the 4th Scroll were more obscure. There were many strange symbols, making it difficult to decipher their true meaning. But just by looking at the parts that he could understand, Lin Jin was certain that this Beastmaster 4th Scroll was no ordinary scroll. Lin Jin understood now. It was no wonder everyone here was so obsessed. They were all trying to study the Beastmaster 4th Scroll. As he read, Lin Jin couldn't feel the flow of time around him anymore. All he wanted to do was understand the secrets of the Beastmaster 4th Scroll. There was even a voice in his mind that if he could understand the Beastmaster 4th Scroll, he would become extremely powerful. And so, Lin Jin lowered his head in thought. But at that moment, a bell rang in the museum, startling Lin Jin out of his reverie. Chapter 282. Lin Jin's eyes lit up, musing that this was the work of an immortal. Could immortals really exist in this world? Lin Jin had Hu Yujin take a look at the stone tablet. The moment she glanced at it, she was once again controlled by the spell. Fortunately, Lin Jin managed to wake her up in time. When he asked her what was written on the Beastmaster 4th Scroll, she told him it was an incomprehensible incantation. Lin Jin knew that he was the only one who could see the method of escape. In other words, only those who had successfully cultivated the Beastmaster 4th Scroll would be able to see the method of escape. As for the people in the plaza, they were still trapped in the spell. Oblivious to their own confusion, they were still painstakingly trying to understand the method, not knowing when it would end. However, Lin Jin dared not be a busybody. Since someone with supernatural powers had set up such a mysterious place, there must be a reason for it. If Lin Jin got pregnant and met someone with a bad temper, that person might just destroy him in minutes. Lin Jin knew his own capabilities. He could fight an opponent like the old dragon, but against an even more mysterious immortal, he would only be asking for trouble. At least not now. Now that he knew how to leave, Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry. He walked around the plaza and noticed that there were at least 50 people here. This must have been the result of years of accumulation. However, there was no food or water here. Even if one's cultivation was successful, they couldn't go without food and water. Even if it was for a short period of time, 3 to 5 years later, they would still die of hunger or thirst no matter how strong they were. However, other than being unkempt and disheveled, none of the people in the plaza seemed to be dying of hunger or thirst. Lin Jin didn't know the specific reason, but he could only say that it was one of the mysteries of this place. Lin Jin began to wander around the plaza. The main hall was obviously Lin Jin's main target. However, there seemed to be an invisible barrier around the hall that prevented him from getting close. After one failed attempt, Lin Jin gave up. If he triggered some restrictive spell, he would be asking for trouble. What Lin Jin was most curious about now was the word Great Goose in the sky. However, it was a little high up and Lin Jin didn't know how to fly, so he couldn't get up. However, Lin Jin did discover something else in the plaza. He found a stone slab at the cloud staircase they came down from. The stone slab was engraved with extremely small characters. Because it was in a remote location, almost no one noticed it. In other words, everyone else was confused by the spell on the stone slab. Even if they walked over, they wouldn't notice it. Lin Jin lowered his head to take a closer look. The words cloud treading were written at the very front. It was another cultivation technique.